Zara Matthews hated flying, not because of any fear of plummeting through the clouds to a fiery death, but because of the people, the awkward small talk, the silent competition for the armrest, and the inescapable intimacy of being trapped with strangers breathing the same recycled air for hours. Yet here she was, boarding a red-eye flight from New York to San Francisco, mentally preparing for 6 hours of polite discomfort. As a clinical psychologist specializing in crisis intervention, Zara had spent the past week attending an intensive conference on trauma-informed care. Her brain was overflowing with new research, her notebook filled with ideas she couldn't wait to implement at her community clinic in Oakland. But first, she had to endure this midnight flight, her only option after staying for the closing keynote that ran late. Zara moved through the first-class cabin where passengers were already settling in, sipping pre-flight champagne. Her ticket was for premium economy, a splurge her modest non-profit budget could barely justify, but necessary for her to arrive functional for her morning meeting. As she passed through, a commotion caught her attention. "What do you mean there's a mechanical delay? Do you understand what's at stake here?" The voice belonged to a man in an impeccable charcoal suit, his face flushed with frustration as he towered over a flight attendant. "I have to be in San Francisco by morning. This is completely unacceptable." The flight attendant maintained her professional smile, though Zara could see the strain around her eyes. "I understand your concern, sir. The captain has assured us it's just a minor issue that should be resolved shortly." "Minor issues become major disasters in my business," the man retorted, running a hand through his salt and pepper hair. Zara continued past them, feeling a twinge of sympathy for the flight attendant. Entitled passengers were among the many reasons she preferred driving when possible. She found her seat in premium economy, 9A, a window seat with no one yet in the aisle position. Small mercies. Settling in, she took out her noise-canceling headphones and the latest Colson Whitehead novel she'd been saving for the flight. Maybe she could lose herself in fiction before attempting sleep. The boarding continued around her, the plane gradually filling with the weary and the restless. Just as she was opening her book, a shadow fell across her tray table. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the man from first class. Up close, she could see the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes, despite his commanding presence. "Excuse me," he said stiffly. "I believe I'm in 9B. Zara blinked in surprise. "I thought you were in first class." "I was." His jaw tightened. "Apparently, they downgraded me due to overbooking. Some VIP made a last-minute reservation." "I see." Zara moved her bag from the empty seat, trying not to show her dismay. So much for a peaceful flight. "Well, welcome to the commoner's quarters." The man didn't smile at her attempt at humor, instead stowing his briefcase overhead with more force than necessary before dropping into the seat beside her. He immediately pressed the call button. "Sir?" The same flight attendant appeared, her smile a little more strained. "Is there any update on the delay?" he asked. "Nothing new since 5 minutes ago, Mr. Hamilton. The captain will make an announcement as soon as we have more information." "Fine." He dismissed her with barely a nod. Once the attendant left, Zara found herself studying her new seatmate surreptitiously. Despite his obvious bad mood, he was undeniably handsome. Tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jawline that spoke of determination. His hands, now tapping impatiently on the armrest, bore no wedding ring, but showed signs of someone who worked hard. A slight callus on his right middle finger where a pen would rest. Their impromptu investigation was interrupted by the captain's voice over the intercom, announcing that the mechanical issue would require another 45 minutes to resolve. A collective groan went up from the cabin. "Damn it," Mr. Hamilton muttered, pulling out his phone and firing off a text before the flight attendants could remind him to switch to airplane mode. Zara slipped on her headphones, trying to give him privacy, but his agitation was palpable. His knee bounced rhythmically, jostling the seat slightly. His breathing had quickened, and a fine sheen of sweat had appeared on his forehead, despite the cool cabin air. As a psychologist, Zara recognized the signs of anxiety escalating toward a panic attack. Normally, she wouldn't intervene. Her professional skills weren't a party trick to be performed on unwilling strangers. But as his breathing became more erratic, she felt her professional instincts kick in. She removed her headphones. "Excuse me," she said quietly, "but are you okay?" He glanced at her, seeming startled that she was speaking to him. "I'm fine," he said automatically. "It's just that you seem a bit anxious. Long day?" He gave a humorless laugh. "You could say that. And this delay is about to cost me millions. That sounds stressful. I'm Zara, by the way." She extended her hand. After a moment's hesitation, he took it. His palm was cool despite his apparent distress. Ethan Hamilton. The name registered vaguely in Zara's mind. She'd seen it in business magazines while waiting in reception areas. CEO of something tech-related, if she remembered correctly. "Is there anything I can do to help?" she offered. "Unless you can fix airplanes or teleport me to San Francisco, probably not." Zara smiled. "Fresh out of teleportation powers, I'm afraid. But I do have some techniques that might help you feel calmer while we wait. Only if you're interested, of course." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "What kind of techniques?" "I'm a psychologist. Specifically, I work with people in crisis situations. Breathing exercises, grounding techniques, simple stuff that can help reduce stress in the moment." He studied her face, seeming to weigh whether this was some kind of come-on or genuine offer. "And you're offering this because—" "Professional habit." Zara shrugged. "Also, selfishly, if you have a full-blown panic attack next to me, it'll make for an even longer flight." That earned her the first genuine smile she'd seen from him. A transformation that softened his features and revealed a dimple in his right cheek. "Straightforward. I appreciate that. So, interested in trying something simple?" He glanced around, seeming concerned about appearances. The cabin was dim now, most passengers engrossed in their devices or trying to sleep despite the delay. "All right," he conceded. "What do I do?" "First, just take a deep breath. In through your nose for 4 counts, hold for 7, then out through your mouth for 8. Ethan followed her instructions, somewhat skeptically at first. After a few cycles, some of the tension visibly left his shoulders. "Now put both feet flat on the floor," she continued. "Feel the pressure of the ground beneath you. Notice 5 things you can see right now. The seat back in front of me, my hands, your book, the overhead light, the exit sign. Good. Now 4 things you can touch." He reached out cautiously. "The armrest, my tie, this seat belt, the cold window." As Zara guided him through the rest of the grounding exercise, she noticed his breathing had steadied and the knee bouncing had stopped. His executive demeanor was reasserting itself, but without the frantic edge from before. "Feeling any better?" she asked when they'd finished. Surprisingly, yes. He looked at her with newfound interest. "Where did you learn that?" "Graduate school, initially. But I've refined it working with clients over the years. Simple mindfulness techniques are remarkably effective for acute stress." The intercom crackled to life again, the captain announcing that the mechanical issue had been resolved and they would begin the boarding process shortly. Collective sighs of relief filled the cabin. "Perfect timing," Ethan said. "Thank you, Dr. Matthews, Zara Matthews. But just Zara is fine." "Well, Zara, you've already saved my evening from complete disaster." He smiled again, more relaxed now. "What kind of psychology do you practice?" "I work primarily with trauma survivors and community mental health. My clinic is in Oakland." "Nonprofit?" he guessed. She nodded. "We serve a lot of people who wouldn't otherwise have access to mental health care." Something in his expression changed, a flicker of genuine respect. "Important work." "I think so, and you? I recognize your name, but I can't place exactly what your company does." "Hamilton Tech. We develop AI solutions for healthcare systems." The boarding process resumed around them, passengers filing past to reach the back of the plane. Despite the late hour and delay, Zara found herself engaged in the conversation. "So what's waiting in San Francisco that's worth millions?" she asked. Ethan sighed, though he seemed more resigned than anxious now. "A potential acquisition. I'm supposed to meet with the board of a biotech startup that's developed an algorithm for predicting drug interactions. If we don't close the deal tomorrow morning, our competitors will swoop in. Hence the stress." "Hence the stress," he agreed, "though I probably overreacted. Force of habit in my line of work, every minute counts." The plane began its taxi to the runway, the familiar safety demonstration playing on the screens. Zara and Ethan fell silent during takeoff, but once they reached cruising altitude, the conversation resumed naturally. "So, what were you doing in New York?" Ethan asked, accepting a glass of water from the flight attendant who seemed surprised by his now polite demeanor. "A conference on trauma-informed care approaches. I was presenting some research on community-based interventions." "You don't seem nervous about public speaking," Zara laughed. "Oh, I was terrified my first few times, but you learned to manage it." "Any techniques for that specifically?" "I have a board presentation next week that I've been dreading." "Visualizing success helps, and remembering that most people are rooting for you to do well, not waiting for you to fail." Their conversation flowed easily as the plane soared through the night sky. Ethan asked thoughtful questions about her work, seeming genuinely interested in the challenges of community mental health. In turn, she found herself fascinated by his descriptions of how AI was revolutionizing medical diagnostics. "The potential to detect patterns that human doctors might miss is incredible," he explained. His earlier stress completely transformed into passionate enthusiasm, especially for rare conditions or in underserved areas where specialist knowledge is limited. "That actually connects to some of the accessibility issues we face in my clinic," Zara said. "Many of our clients have complicated medical histories alongside their mental health concerns." "Have you considered implementing telehealth options?" Ethan asked, his mind clearly shifting to problem-solving mode. "We've tried, but funding for the right infrastructure is always an issue." The flight attendants began the meal service, interrupting their conversation momentarily. Despite the late hour, Zara found herself wide awake, engaged by the unexpected connection with her seatmate. She was also acutely aware of how his knee occasionally brushed against hers in the confined space, sending an unexpected flutter through her stomach. As they ate, Ethan told her about growing up in Boston, the son of a nurse and an engineer, and how he'd started his company from his garage apartment after dropping out of MIT. Zara shared stories of her childhood in Chicago, her mother's influence on her decision to pursue psychology, and her move to California for graduate school. "Something changed for you there," Ethan observed, displaying a surprising perceptiveness. "Your expression shifts when you talk about California." Zara nodded, impressed by his insight. "My mother got sick during my second year of the doctoral program, pancreatic cancer. I almost dropped out to care for her, but she insisted I continue. She died 3 months before I defended my dissertation." "I'm sorry," he said softly, and she could tell he meant it. "That must have been incredibly difficult." "It was, but in some ways it clarified things for me. Life is short, you know? I decided to focus my career on work that felt meaningful, even if it meant making less money than I could in private practice." Ethan was quiet for a moment, contemplative. "I admire that clarity of purpose. Sometimes in the business world, it's easy to lose sight of what really matters." The cabin lights dimmed as they finished their meals, the majority of passengers attempting to sleep during the overnight flight. In the soft glow of their reading lights, the conversation took on a more intimate tone. "What about you?" Zara asked. "Any family?" "Divorced," Ethan replied. 3 years ago, no children. My ex-wife said I was married to my company." He gave a self-deprecating smile. "She wasn't entirely wrong." "And now?" "Now I'm trying to be more balanced, less reactive to every crisis. Though clearly," he gestured to the space between them, "I still have work to do." Well, recognizing the pattern is the first step, Zara smiled. Very good, Mr. Hamilton. That'll be $500 for this therapy session. He laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Worth every penny. I haven't felt this relaxed I can't remember how long. Their eyes met in the dimness, and Zara felt an unmistakable current of attraction pass between them. Ethan's gaze dropped briefly to her lips before he cleared his throat and looked away. We should try to get some sleep, Zara suggested, aware of how the intimate atmosphere between them had suddenly intensified. It's going to be a short night as it is. Ethan nodded, seeming grateful for the sensible suggestion. You're right, and I have that meeting first thing. They reclined their seats as much as the premium economy allowed. Zara turned toward the window, pulling her blanket up to her shoulders. She closed her eyes but found sleep elusive, her mind replaying their conversation, analyzing the unexpected connection that had formed so quickly. Beside her, Ethan's breathing gradually deepened. She risked a glance over her shoulder and found him asleep, his face relaxed and younger-looking without the tension of conscious control. A lock of his hair had fallen across his forehead, and Zara felt a ridiculous urge to brush it back. Instead, she turned resolutely toward the window again and eventually drifted into a light sleep. She woke to gentle pressure on her shoulder. Ethan was leaning slightly toward her, his hand barely touching her. Sorry to wake you, he whispered, but we're beginning our descent. The flight attendant asked for seats to be upright. Zara straightened her seat, disoriented from the too brief sleep. The cabin was brightening as flight attendants moved through, collecting trash and preparing for landing. Outside the window, the first pale light of dawn illuminated the clouds below them. Did you sleep at all? She asked, noticing the shadows still present under Ethan's eyes. A bit. More than I usually do on flights, actually. He smiled at her, probably thanks to those relaxation techniques. Their descent into San Francisco was smooth, the city still shrouded in its characteristic morning fog. As the plane taxied to the gate, Zara felt an unexpected pang of regret that their time together was ending. So, Ethan said as they gathered their belongings, about what you said regarding telehealth infrastructure for your clinic. Yes? I'd like to help. Hamilton Tech has a community outreach program, and this sounds exactly like the kind of project we should support. Zara blinked in surprise. That's very generous, but no strings attached, he assured her quickly. It's good business sense, too. The more we can demonstrate our technology's effectiveness in diverse settings, the better. The plane had reached the gate, and passengers were standing, eager to disembark after the long night. Ethan pulled a business card from his wallet and handed it to her. My personal number is on the back, he said. Call me when you're back at your clinic and we can discuss the details. Zara accepted the card, noticing how his fingers brushed against hers in the exchange. Thank you, I will. As they moved slowly with the crowd toward the exit, Ethan glanced at his watch. My driver should be waiting. Can I offer you a ride? That's kind, but I'm heading to Oakland and you probably need to go straight to your meeting. Disappointment flickered across his face, but he nodded. Another time, perhaps. They reached the terminal, the bright lights and bustle of the airport a stark contrast to the intimate atmosphere they'd shared on the plane. Standing to one side of the flow of deplaning passengers, they faced each other somewhat awkwardly. It was a pleasure meeting you, Dr. Matthews, Ethan said formally, extending his hand. Zara took it, feeling the same spark she'd noticed earlier. Likewise, Mr. Hamilton. His hand lingered in hers a moment longer than necessary. I hope I'll hear from you soon. You will, she promised. With a final smile, he turned and strode away, his confident posture restored as he transformed back into the powerful CEO navigating his natural habitat. Zara watched him go, wondering if their connection had been merely a product of the strange intimacy that sometimes formed between travelers, a relationship out of time and space that would dissolve in the light of day, Shaking off the thought, she headed toward the BART station to catch a train to Oakland. 3 days later, Zara sat in her small office at the Oakland Community Wellness Center, reviewing client notes between sessions. The clinic was housed in a converted Victorian that had seen better days, but its worn charm and accessibility to the community made it perfect for their purposes. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hoping you haven't forgotten about discussing the telehealth project. Still interested? Ethan Hamilton. Zara stared at the message, surprised not only that he had followed up, but that he'd been thinking about their conversation days later. She had intended to call him, but the whirlwind of returning to work after the conference had pushed it from her immediate priorities. Still interested, she replied. Just catching up after being away. When would be a good time to talk? His response came quickly. How about dinner tonight? I can come to Oakland. Zara hesitated. Was this a business meeting or something more personal? And did she want it to be one or the other? Dinner works, she responded after careful consideration. 7 p.m.? I can suggest a place near the clinic. Perfect. Send me the address. She recommended Nido, a Mexican restaurant with excellent food and a relaxed atmosphere that wouldn't make her feel underdressed coming straight from work. After sending the address, she returned to her notes, trying not to overthink the evening ahead. Her last client of the day was Marquise, a 16-year-old struggling with anger management issues after witnessing a shooting in his neighborhood. They had been working together for 6 months, and his progress was encouraging. You seem different today, Dr. Z, Marquis observed near the end of their session, like lighter or something. Zara raised an eyebrow. Oh? How so? I don't know. Just vibin' different. He grinned. You got a date or something? I have a business meeting, she replied primly, though she could feel warmth rising in her cheeks. Uh-huh. Marquis nodded knowingly. A business meeting that's got you checking your hair in the reflection of your computer screen. That's enough analysis of your therapist for today, Zara laughed. Let's get back to your homework for the week. After Marquis left, Zara did allow herself a trip to the small bathroom down the hall to freshen up. Her curls were cooperating today, falling in defined spirals around her face. She refreshed her lipstick and straightened her blazer over her simple navy dress. Practical for work, but nice enough for dinner. She arrived at Nido a few minutes early, choosing a table toward the back where they could talk without shouting over the restaurant's lively atmosphere. Ethan arrived exactly at 7, scanning the room until his eyes found her. The smile that spread across his face sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. He was dressed more casually than on the plane, in dark jeans and a light blue button-down with the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms. The outfit probably cost more than her monthly rent, but the relaxed style made him seem more approachable. Dr. Matthews, he greeted her, sitting down across the table. I thought we'd established that it's Zara, she replied with a smile. Zara, he agreed, his eyes warm. Thank you for suggesting this place. It smells amazing. The waiter appeared to take their drink orders, a glass of red wine for Zara and sparkling water for Ethan. Not drinking tonight? She asked after the waiter left. I'm still catching up on sleep after our red eye, he explained. Alcohol would finish me off entirely. How did your meeting go with the biotech company? A satisfied smile spread across his face. We closed the deal, so your intervention on the plane potentially saved millions, as dramatic as that sounds. Glad I could help, she laughed, though I think you're giving me too much credit. I'm not. I was spiraling and you pulled me back. His expression became more serious. You have a gift, Zara. It's not just your training, though that's clearly excellent. It's something innate in how you connect with people. The directness of his compliment caught her off guard. Thank you, she said simply. Their drinks arrived along with chips and guacamole that Ethan had ordered. As they looked over the menu, he asked about her return to work and how the clinic had managed during her absence. We make do, Zara explained after taking a sip of her wine. Our staff is small but dedicated. Everyone picks up the slack when someone's out. How many providers do you have? 3 full-time therapists, including myself, 2 part-time, and a psychiatric nurse practitioner who comes in twice a week for medication management. We also have MSW interns from Berkeley during the academic year. And what's your role beyond providing therapy? I'm the clinical director. I handle program development, supervision of the interns, and, unfortunately, a lot of grant writing. Not your favorite part? I'd rather be doing therapy than begging for money, she admitted. But it's necessary. We operate on a sliding scale, and many of our clients can't pay anything at all. The waiter returned to take their food orders. After he left, Ethan leaned forward, his expression shifting to business mode. So, tell me what kind of telehealth setup would make the biggest impact for your clinic, he said. For the next 20 minutes, they discussed the technological needs of the center, secure platforms for video sessions, digital intake and assessment tools, and ways to make the technology accessible to clients without reliable internet or devices. The biggest challenge, Zara explained, is that many of our clients don't have smartphones or computers. Some are housing insecure. Traditional telehealth models assume a level of resource access that doesn't match our population's reality. Ethan nodded thoughtfully. What if we set up private telehealth stations at partner locations, places your clients already go? Libraries, community centers, maybe even certain supportive businesses. That could actually work, Zara said, impressed by his understanding of the problem. We'd need to ensure privacy, of course. Absolutely. We could design custom booth solutions that are secure and soundproof but not claustrophobic or intimidating. Their food arrived, momentarily pausing the conversation. Zara had ordered enchiladas suizas, while Ethan had gone for the carne asada. They both exclaimed appreciatively at the first bites. "This is incredible," Ethan said. "I need to spend more time in Oakland, clearly." "It's a special city," Zara agreed. "Lots of challenges, but so much heart and creativity too." "How long have you lived here?" "Almost 10 years now. I came for my postdoc at UCSF and fell in love with the Bay Area." "And your family? Are they still in Chicago?" A shadow crossed Zara's face briefly. "My mother passed away, as I mentioned on the plane. My father remarried and moved to Arizona. We're not particularly close." "I'm sorry to hear that," Ethan said sincerely. Zara shrugged, taking another sip of her wine. "It's complicated. He didn't handle my mother's illness well. Checked out emotionally long before she died." "And emotionally abandoning you in the process," Ethan observed. She looked up, meeting his eyes. "Yes, actually, that's exactly what happened." "I have some experience with that pattern," he said quietly. "My mother was the emotional center of our family. When she was diagnosed with MS, my father buried himself in work. His way of coping, I suppose, but it left us kids to handle everything else." "That shapes you," Zara nodded. "For better or worse." "Speaking of shaping," Ethan said, clearly trying to lighten the mood, "tell me more about this community outreach program you mentioned. How do you see Hamilton Tech fitting into your telehealth vision?" As they continued eating, Zara outlined her ideas for expanding the clinic's reach through technology, emphasizing the importance of solutions that respected clients' dignity and particular needs. Ethan listened intently, occasionally asking insightful questions or offering suggestions that showed he was taking her expertise seriously. By the time they finished their meals, they had sketched out a preliminary plan that excited them both. "This could be groundbreaking," Ethan said, his eyes bright with enthusiasm. "A model that could be replicated in underserved communities across the country." "Let's start with making it work in Oakland," Zara smiled, though she was equally excited by the possibilities. When the check came, Ethan reached for it immediately. "Please," he said when Zara began to protest. "This was my invitation, and technically a business meeting." "Was it, though?" The words slipped out before she could consider them. Ethan's eyes met hers, his expression suddenly more serious. "Not entirely," he admitted. "I wanted to see you again. The business discussion was a convenient excuse." The honesty of his response sent warmth spreading through her chest. "I'm glad you made the excuse then," she said softly. Outside the restaurant, the evening air was cool but pleasant. They stood facing each other on the sidewalk, the moment stretching between them. "Can I see you again?" Ethan asked. "Perhaps without the pretense of business next time?" Zara felt herself smiling. "I'd like that. How about this weekend? Saturday? I could show you some of my favorite spots in the city. Saturday works for me. I'll pick you up at 11? We could make a day of it." "That sounds perfect." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes questioning. When Zara didn't move away, he leaned down and placed a soft, brief kiss on her lips. It was gentle but electric, sending tingles down to her toes. "Good night, Zara," he said, his voice slightly rougher than before. "Good night, Ethan." She watched him walk to his car, a sleek black Tesla, of course, before turning toward her own modest Prius. As she drove home, Zara couldn't keep the smile from her face, even as a small voice in the back of her mind wondered if she was getting in over her head. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, a rarity in the typically foggy Bay Area. Zara stood in front of her closet, uncharacteristically indecisive about what to wear, finally settling on high-waisted jeans, a rust-colored blouse that complemented her deep brown skin, and comfortable ankle boots suitable for walking. She checked herself in the mirror one last time. Her apartment in North Oakland was small but thoughtfully decorated, a mixture of mid-century modern pieces she'd carefully collected from estate sales and colorful artwork from local artists. It wasn't grand, but it was entirely hers, a sanctuary after days spent absorbing other people's trauma. At precisely 11, her buzzer rang. Ethan stood at her door in dark jeans and a casual gray sweater that somehow looked both relaxed and expensive. "You look beautiful," he said, his eyes warm as they took her in. "Thanks," Zara smiled, surprising herself with a flutter of nervousness. "You clean up pretty well yourself." "I brought you something." He held out a small paper bag from a local bakery. "The concierge at my hotel recommended these." Inside were 2 perfectly flaky pain au chocolat. "Breakfast?" she asked. "A pre-adventure snack," he clarified. "I thought we'd start with lunch in North Beach if you're hungry now." "Starving, actually," Zara admitted, grabbing her bag. "I was too nervous to eat breakfast." "Nervous?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, looking pleased. "About seeing me?" "No, about the weather," she deadpanned. "Of course about seeing you." He laughed, touching the small of her back lightly as they walked to his car. The gesture was subtle but possessive in a way that sent warmth spreading through her. "So, what's on the agenda today?" she asked as he drove them toward the Bay Bridge. "I thought I'd show you a few of my favorite places in the city. I lived in San Francisco for a few years before opening our headquarters in Palo Alto. I've done all the tourist spots, but I'm always up for seeing the city through someone else's eyes." Ethan looked pleased at her response. "I'm not planning anything touristy, just places that matter to me." Their first stop was a small Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street in North Beach. It was unassuming from the outside, but inside, the aroma of garlic and fresh herbs wrapped around them like a warm embrace. "Marco." The older man behind the counter greeted Ethan with genuine affection, coming around to clasp his hand and pat his shoulder. "It's been too long!" "Marco, this is Zara," Ethan introduced. "Zara, Marco makes the best pasta in California, though he'd argue it's the best in the world." "Not argue. State fact," Marco said with a wink at Zara. "Any friend of Ethan's is family here. Come, I give you the good table." The good table was in a cozy corner by the window where dappled sunlight filtered through a small lemon tree growing in a pot outside. Marco brought them a bottle of wine without being asked, on the house for Ethan's belladonna, and suggested they let him choose their meal. "I trust you completely," Ethan said, and Marco beamed before bustling back to the kitchen. "You're clearly a regular," Zara observed, taking a sip of the excellent wine. "I found this place when I first moved to San Francisco. I was broke, working crazy hours trying to get Hamilton Tech off the ground. Marco used to feed me on credit when I couldn't make payroll." Zara's eyebrows rose. "It's hard to imagine you struggling financially." "The first few years were tough. I lived on ramen and coffee, coding 18 hours a day." He smiled ruefully. "Marco probably kept me from getting scurvy." "So you make a point to come back." "Whenever I'm in the city, success is nice, but it's important to remember where you came from and who helped you along the way." Zara nodded, filing away this insight into his character. She'd met plenty of successful men who conveniently forgot the helping hands that had lifted them. Marco returned with plates of antipasti, marinated olives, prosciutto, and tiny mozzarella balls drizzled with olive oil and herbs. "So how did you go from struggling startup to tech giant?" Zara asked, savoring the perfectly cured prosciutto. Ethan's eyes lit up as he told her about the early days of his company, the pivotal algorithm he'd developed that could predict medical treatment outcomes based on patient data, the first major hospital system that took a chance on his technology, and the moment he realized his innovation could actually save lives. "The turning point was when we prevented a critical medication error that would have killed a 6-year-old girl," he explained. "After that, investors were lining up, and we've been growing ever since." Zara listened attentively, genuinely fascinated by his journey. Despite his current wealth and status, it was clear that Ethan's motivation went beyond money or power. "What about you?" he asked as Marco cleared their antipasti plates and brought bowls of handmade pasta with a delicate truffle cream sauce. "What led you to community mental health instead of a cushy private practice?" Zara twirled pasta on her fork, considering her answer. "When my mother was sick, we had good insurance through her job as a high school principal. But I saw how many families in our neighborhood struggled to access basic health care, let alone mental health services." "Your mother was a principal?" Ethan asked, seeming interested in this detail. Zara nodded. "At a public high school in Chicago's South Side, Eliza Nichols Academy." "Named after someone significant?" "A local civil rights activist who fought for educational equity in the 60s, Zara explained. "My mother admired her greatly. She actually knew her personally. Ms. Nichols was ancient by then, but still sharp as a tack." "Your mother sounds like an impressive woman." "She was," Zara said softly. "Brilliant, passionate about education, determined to create opportunities for every student. Even when she was sick, she was more worried about her students than herself." "She clearly influenced your path." "In every way," Zara agreed. "Watching her fight was what made me want to make a difference too, just in a different field." Their conversation flowed easily through the remainder of lunch, touching on books they'd read recently, their shared love of jazz, and Ethan's surprising interest in urban gardening, a hobby he'd taken up to combat stress after his divorce. When Marco refused to let them pay for lunch, "For you, Ethan, always on the house," Ethan discreetly left a generous tip and promised to return soon. "Where to next?" Zara asked as they stepped back into the sunshine. "A short drive, then a bit of a hike. Are those boots comfortable for walking?" "Lead the way," she said, confident in her footwear choice. Ethan drove them to the Presidio, parking near a trailhead that Zara wasn't familiar with despite her years in the Bay Area. The path wound through eucalyptus trees, the scent sharp and refreshing in the afternoon warmth. "This trail isn't on most tourist maps," Ethan explained as they walked. "It's a bit of a local secret." The path climbed gently upward, and Zara was glad for her regular yoga practice as they ascended. Ethan matched his pace to hers naturally, occasionally pointing out native plants or birds. His hand found hers about halfway up, their fingers interlacing as if they'd done this 100 times before. Just as Zara was beginning to feel the exertion, the trail opened up to reveal a breathtaking view of the Golden Gate Bridge, the bay glittering beyond it in the sunlight. "Oh," she breathed, stopping in her tracks. Ethan smiled at her reaction, Worth the climb? Absolutely. He led her to a flat rock overlooking the vista, and they sat side by side, hands still linked between them. I used to come here when things got overwhelming in the early days, he told her. Somehow seeing the bridge and the ocean beyond it. It gave me perspective. Whatever problem I was facing seemed smaller from up here. I can see why, Zara said. It's like a reminder that the world is so much bigger than our individual struggles. Ethan turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful. Exactly. That's exactly it. A comfortable silence fell between them as they absorbed the view. After a while, Ethan reached into the small backpack he'd brought and pulled out a thermos. Coffee? He offered. It might be slightly sacrilegious, but I prefer it to wine for contemplating life's big questions. Zara laughed. Coffee sounds perfect. He poured the steaming liquid into the thermos cap for her, then took a sip directly from the container. So, Dr. Matthews, since we're being philosophical up here, what are your big questions these days? She considered this while sipping the excellent coffee. Professionally, I wonder if the work we do actually creates lasting change, if we're just putting band-aids on systemic wounds. And personally? Zara hesitated, then decided on honesty. Whether I'm capable of balancing meaningful work with a meaningful relationship, I haven't had much success with the latter. Previous relationships ended because of your dedication to your career? Some did. Others, I think I've chosen men who didn't truly value what I do. They liked the idea of dating a psychologist, found it exotic or interesting at first, but grew threatened by my independence or the emotional demands of my work. Ethan nodded slowly. I understand that. After my divorce, I did some reflecting on why my marriage failed. Clara, my ex, she was right that I was obsessed with the company. But it wasn't just ambition driving me. I genuinely believed we were making a difference in healthcare. And she didn't share that vision? She didn't believe in it the way I did. Thought I was naive about the medical establishment, that they'd just exploit my technology to make more money without improving patient care. Is she in healthcare herself? Pharmaceutical marketing, Ethan said with a wry smile. So she had reason for her cynicism. But I couldn't live with it ultimately. I need to believe my work matters. I think that's what attracted me to you on the plane, Zara admitted. Despite your initial stress, I could tell you cared deeply about something beyond yourself. Ethan's eyes softened. He leaned forward, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. May I? He murmured. At her nod, he kissed her, more deeply than the gentle goodnight kiss they'd shared outside the restaurant. Zara felt herself responding instantly, the connection between them flaring into something electric and undeniable. His hand slid from her cheek to the back of her neck, cradling her head as the kiss deepened further. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that properly since I saw you in the restaurant on Wednesday. It was worth the wait, Zara smiled, her fingers lightly touching his jaw. They stayed at the outlook point for another hour, talking and occasionally kissing, before Ethan suggested they continue their exploration of the city. The remainder of the afternoon was spent wandering through Ethan's favorite bookstore, where he insisted on buying her a rare first edition of James Baldwin essays after discovering their shared appreciation for his work. As evening approached, he drove them to a small jazz club in the Mission District. The place was intimate and authentically gritty, with excellent music and strong drinks served in mismatched glasses. How does a tech CEO even know about this place? Zara asked as they found a small table near the stage where a quartet was setting up. I played saxophone through college, Ethan revealed. Nothing professional, but I love the music. I found this spot during a particularly low point after my divorce. Came every weekend for months. You continue to surprise me, Ethan Hamilton. In good ways, I hope. His eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Definitely good, she assured him, feeling herself falling deeper into whatever this was becoming between them. The quartet began to play, innovative arrangements of classic standards that had Ethan nodding appreciatively and occasionally explaining subtle musical references to Zara. His knowledge was impressive, and his enthusiasm endearing. Halfway through the second set, Ethan's hand found hers on the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a way that sent shivers up her arm. When their eyes met in the dim light, the intensity of his gaze made it difficult for Zara to breathe. "What are you thinking right now?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear it over the music. "That this doesn't feel like a first date," she answered honestly. "It feels like we've known each other much longer," he finished when she trailed off. "Yes, exactly that. I feel it too." His fingers tightened around hers. "I don't believe in fate or soulmates or any of that, but meeting you on that plane feels significant somehow, like an intersection point that changes the trajectory of everything that follows." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep in Zara. She leaned forward and kissed him softly, not caring about the public setting. "I'm glad you were stressed out and downgraded to my seat," she whispered against his lips. He laughed, the sound warm and intimate between them. "Best airline mishap of my life." When the music ended, they reluctantly left the club, the night air cool against their warm skin. Standing beside his car, Ethan pulled her close, his arms encircling her waist. "I don't want this day to end," he admitted. "Neither do I," Zara said, then added bravely, "So maybe it doesn't have to. Yet." His eyes darkened, understanding her meaning immediately. "Are you sure?" In answer, she kissed him again, deeper and with clear intent. "Take me home, Ethan," she murmured. "My home." The drive back to Oakland was charged with anticipation, Ethan's hand resting on her thigh, both of them acutely aware of the decision they'd made. As they crossed the Bay Bridge, the lights of San Francisco receding behind them, Zara felt not only desire but a sense of rightness about the path they were on together. Zara woke to the unfamiliar sensation of an arm draped across her waist and warm breath against her neck. Early morning light filtered through her blinds, casting golden stripes across her bedroom. For a moment, she lay perfectly still, absorbing the reality of Ethan Hamilton sleeping beside her, his body curved protectively around hers. The night had been everything she'd hoped for and more, passionate but also tender, with a surprising ease between them that made their first time together feel like a homecoming rather than a new frontier. Ethan had been both confident and considerate, attentive to her responses in a way that spoke of genuine connection rather than mere physical attraction. Careful not to wake him, Zara slipped out from under his arm and padded to the bathroom. She caught sight of herself in the mirror, hair tousled, a small mark on her collarbone where Ethan had been particularly enthusiastic, her eyes bright despite the limited sleep. She looked happy, she realized with a small shock. Genuinely, unreservedly happy in a way she hadn't been in a long time. After brushing her teeth and splashing water on her face, she returned to find Ethan awake, propped up on one elbow, watching the doorway for her return. "I was afraid you might be having second thoughts," he said, his voice gravelly with sleep. Zara smiled, crossing to the bed and sitting on its edge. "Not a single one." He reached out, taking her hand and bringing it to his lips. "Good. Because I'm already thinking about how soon I can see you again." "You're seeing me right now," she teased. "You know what I mean." He tugged gently, pulling her back under the covers and into his arms. "I have to fly to Boston tomorrow for meetings. I'll be gone 3 days. Have dinner with me when I get back? I'd like that." She nestled against his chest, enjoying the solid warmth of him. "Or," he said thoughtfully, "you could come with me." Zara pulled back slightly to look at his face. "To Boston? Tomorrow?" "I have clients, Ethan." "Right. Of course." He shook his head. "Sorry, that was impulsive. I'm not usually impulsive." "I'm gathering that," she said, amused by his slight discomfort. "I like that I make you a little impulsive." His arms tightened around her. "You make me a lot of things I'm not usually." They spent the morning in bed, eventually making their way to her small kitchen where Ethan insisted on cooking breakfast. His omelets were surprisingly excellent for a man who admitted he rarely cooked for himself. "Hidden talents," Zara remarked, sipping the coffee he'd also prepared perfectly. "I stress-watched a lot of cooking shows during the startup phase," he explained. "Something about the precision of a good recipe appealed to my programmer brain." When he finally had to leave, reluctantly, with many kisses at the door, Zara found herself standing in her living room, touching her lips and smiling like a teenager after a first date. "Get it together, Matthews," she muttered to herself, but the smile wouldn't fade. The weeks that followed took on a dreamlike quality. Between Ethan's business commitments and Zara's responsibilities at the clinic, their time together was limited but intensely focused. When Ethan returned from Boston, he brought her a first-edition psychology text he'd found in an antiquarian bookshop. The week after, he flew to Chicago for a conference but was back in time to attend a fundraiser for her clinic, writing a check that made the board chair's eyes widen in shock. True to his word, he had his community outreach team working with Zara's clinic on the telehealth initiative. The project was progressing rapidly, with prototype booths already being tested in 2 community centers. 6 weeks after their first date, Ethan invited Zara to a gala dinner for Hamilton Tech's charitable foundation. It would be their first public appearance together in his world, and Zara spent more time than she'd like to admit finding the right dress, eventually settling on a floor-length gown in deep emerald that complemented her complexion and made the most of her curves. When Ethan picked her up, his appreciative gaze as she opened the door told her the effort had been worthwhile. "You look incredible," he said, his voice low. "I'm going to be the envy of every person at this event." The gala was held at the Legion of Honor, the museum's neoclassical architecture providing a dramatic backdrop for the evening. As Ethan guided her through the crowd with a hand at the small of her back, Zara became acutely aware of curious glances directed their way. A black woman in a sea of predominantly white faces, her hand linked with one of Silicon Valley's most eligible bachelors. "Ethan!" A silver-haired man intercepted them, champagne flute in hand. "I was hoping to catch you before the speeches. And who is this lovely lady?" "Richard, this is Dr. Zara Matthews," Ethan said, his hand tightening slightly on hers. "Zara, Richard Kensington, our chief financial officer and one of Hamilton Tech's earliest investors." "A doctor? Medical?" Richard asked, shaking her hand. "Clinical psychology," Zara clarified. "I run a community mental health clinic in Oakland." "Fascinating," Richard said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "And how did you two meet?" "On a flight," Ethan answered before Zara could speak. "Zara saved me from a full-blown panic attack during a delay." Richard chuckled. "Always the knight in distress, eh, Ethan? Well, lovely to meet you, Dr. Matthews. I should mingle a bit before dinner." As Richard moved away, Ethan leaned down to whisper in Zara's ear. "Sorry about him. Old money, older attitudes." "I've developed a thick skin," she assured him. "Occupational hazard of being both black and female in professional settings." Ethan's expression darkened. "You shouldn't have to have a thick skin. Not here, not anywhere." The genuine indignation in his voice warmed her. Before she could respond, a striking woman in a red dress approached, her smile bright but her eyes assessing. "Ethan, darling, I was starting to think you were avoiding me." "Vanessa," Ethan greeted her with a polite nod. "Not avoiding, just making the rounds. Allow me to introduce Dr. Zara Matthews." "Zara, this is Vanessa Chen, our head of public relations." "So you're the reason our CEO has been so distracted lately," Vanessa said, her tone playful but with an undercurrent Zara couldn't quite place. "The board has been curious. Ethan's usually so focused on acquisition season." "I assure you I'm still very focused," Ethan said, his tone cooling slightly. "In fact, The partnership with Zara's clinic for the telehealth initiative is already yielding valuable data for our healthcare AI systems. Vanessa's perfectly shaped eyebrows rose. A professional connection as well? How convenient? The telehealth project came after we met, Zara said smoothly, refusing to be intimidated. Ethan's been incredibly supportive of our clinic's mission. I'm sure he has. Vanessa smiled, the expression not quite reaching her eyes. Well, I should continue my PR duties. Lovely meeting you, Dr. Matthews. As Vanessa glided away, Zara gave Ethan a questioning look. Ex-girlfriend? She guessed. Ethan grimaced. Briefly, very briefly, before she came to work for Hamilton Tech, actually. She's brilliant at her job, but she hasn't quite moved on? Something like that. I'm sorry if she made you uncomfortable. Zara squeezed his hand. It takes more than a territorial ex to rattle me. They continued circulating, Ethan introducing her to colleagues and business associates. Some were genuinely welcoming, asking thoughtful questions about her work and the telehealth initiative. Others barely disguised their curiosity about how a community clinic director had captured the attention of one of Tech's most influential figures. During dinner, Zara found herself seated beside an older gentleman who introduced himself as Dr. Harold Werner, head of Hamilton Tech's Medical Advisory Board. Ethan tells me you're doing remarkable work in Oakland, he said as they were served the first course. That's kind of him to say, Zara replied. We're trying to make mental health care accessible to those who need it most. A noble mission. I spent the early part of my career working in community health in Boston. Challenging but rewarding work. Boston? Ethan mentioned his family is from there. Indeed. I've known the Hamiltons for years. I was his mother's neurologist, in fact. That's right. Ethan mentioned she had MS, Zara recalled. Dr. Werner nodded. A brilliant woman, Elizabeth. She was a professor of mathematics at MIT before her condition forced her early retirement. Ethan inherited her analytical mind and his father's drive. He speaks of her with such admiration, Zara said. I lost my mother to pancreatic cancer several years ago. I think that shared experience of losing a parent to illness created an immediate connection between us. I'm sorry for your loss, Dr. Werner said sincerely. Was your mother also in academia? Education, but K-12. She was the principal of a public high school in Chicago for over 20 years. Eliza Nichols Academy on the South Side. Dr. Werner's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Eliza Nichols, you say? Yes, named after a local civil rights activist. Fascinating coincidence, he murmured, almost to himself. I'm sorry? He seemed to catch himself. Oh, nothing important. Just an unusual name that triggered an old memory. He smiled, changing the subject. Ethan tells me you're helping design the psychological assessment components of their new healthcare platform. The conversation moved on, but Zara noticed Dr. Werner glancing at her thoughtfully several times throughout the meal. After dessert, when Ethan was pulled away briefly by a board member, Dr. Werner leaned closer to her. Forgive my curiosity earlier, Dr. Matthews. Elizabeth Hamilton, Ethan's mother, had a close friend named Eliza in her university days. The name simply caught me by surprise. It's a relatively uncommon name, Zara agreed. Though the woman my mother's school was named for would have been much older, I imagine. Yes, of course, Dr. Werner nodded. Just one of those connections the mind makes. I'm getting sentimental in my old age. He patted her hand avuncularly. I'm glad Ethan has found someone like you. He's been too isolated since his divorce. Before Zara could respond, Ethan returned, placing a hand on her shoulder. I hope Harold hasn't been boring you with medical jargon. Not at all, Zara assured him. We've been having a lovely conversation about education and coincidences. Coincidences? Ethan asked. Nothing significant, Dr. Werner said, rising. Just old men's ramblings. If you'll excuse me, I should say hello to the Andersons before they leave. As Dr. Werner walked away, Ethan took his vacated seat. He likes you, he observed. Harold doesn't warm up to people easily. He seems very fond of you, Zara said. He mentioned being your mother's neurologist. He was more than that. Almost a surrogate father after my dad checked out emotionally. Ethan's expression softened. He was there for us through the worst of Mom's decline. The formal program began then, with speeches from the foundation director and several major donors. Ethan was called to the podium last, delivering a compelling vision of technology's potential to bridge healthcare gaps in underserved communities. He spoke with passion and clarity, and Zara felt a swell of pride watching him. "And I'm particularly excited about our newest initiative," Ethan was saying, "a telehealth project developed in partnership with the Oakland Community Wellness Center, which is already showing promising results in expanding mental health care access." He went on to explain the project, giving full credit to Zara's clinic for the innovative implementation approach. When he returned to their table after thunderous applause, his eyes sought hers immediately. "Was that okay?" he asked quietly. "Mentioning you in the clinic?" "More than okay," she assured him, "though I think you overstated our contribution. If anything, I understated it." His hand found hers under the table. "This partnership has been transformative for our approach." As the evening wound down and they prepared to leave, Vanessa reappeared, touching Ethan's arm familiarly. "The Peterson Group was very impressed with your speech," she said. "Their CEO wants to schedule a meeting next week to discuss potential investment." "Have Margot set it up," Ethan replied, his tone professional but distant. "And make sure Dr. Werner is included. His medical expertise will be crucial for their questions." "Of course." Vanessa's gaze slid to Zara. "Lovely to have met you, Dr. Matthews. Will you be attending the Innovation Summit next month as well?" Before Zara could answer, Ethan interjected smoothly. "We haven't discussed our plans yet, Vanessa. Now, if you'll excuse us, it's been a long evening." In the car heading back to Oakland, Zara kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. "Your world is exhausting, Ethan," he laughed. "Hence my panic attack on the plane. Constant performance, constant evaluation." He glanced at her. "You were amazing tonight. Everyone was impressed." "Everyone except Vanessa." "Vanessa's opinion doesn't matter." Zara hesitated, then decided to ask. "Dr. Werner seemed to react strangely when I mentioned my mother's school, Eliza Nichols Academy. He said something about your mother having a friend named Eliza in college." "Really?" Ethan frowned slightly. "I don't recall her mentioning anyone by that name, but I was young when she got sick. There's probably a lot I don't know about her early life." "It was just an odd moment," Zara shrugged. He dismissed it as a coincidence. "Probably was," Ethan agreed, reaching over to take her hand. "Speaking of coincidences, what are the chances you'd be free to come to my place in Palo Alto for the weekend? I have a garden that needs showing off and a kitchen I rarely use that deserves some attention." Zara smiled, pushing the strange interaction with Dr. Werner from her mind. "I think those chances are extremely good, Mr. Hamilton." "Excellent." He lifted her hand to his lips. "Because I'm finding that I sleep much better with you beside me." "Is that your subtle way of saying you miss me?" "There's nothing subtle about how much I miss you when we're apart," he said, his voice low and serious. "I'm falling for you, Zara, hard and fast." The simple honesty of his declaration took her breath away. "I'm falling for you too," she admitted softly. For now, that seemed like enough. This shared acknowledgement of deepening feelings, the promise of a weekend together, the comfortable silence as they crossed the bridge toward Oakland. Whatever complications might lie ahead, in this moment, everything felt right. Ethan's home in Palo Alto wasn't the ostentatious mansion Zara had half expected. Instead, it was a tastefully modernized craftsman on a secluded street, surrounded by mature oak trees and thoughtfully landscaped gardens. As they walked through the front door, Zara felt an immediate sense of peace. The house had the same quiet confidence as its owner, nothing to prove but much to appreciate. "So this is where the famous Ethan Hamilton recharges," she said, taking in the open living area with its warm wood tones and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the garden. "Or attempts to," he replied, setting her overnight bag down. "I don't spend as much time here as I should." Zara wandered toward a wall of built-in bookshelves, running her fingers along the spines. His collection was impressive: classic literature, modern fiction, and numerous volumes on technology, medicine, and business strategy. On one shelf, slightly set apart, was a collection of framed photographs. She was drawn to one showing a young Ethan, perhaps 12 years old, standing beside a woman with his same intense eyes and thoughtful expression. "Your mother?" she asked softly. Ethan came to stand beside her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. "Yes, that was taken the summer before her diagnosis. We were at Cape Cod for a family vacation." Zara studied the photograph more closely. Elizabeth Hamilton had been a beautiful woman with intelligent eyes and an elegant bearing despite the casual beach setting. In the picture, her arm was draped around young Ethan's shoulders, their matching smiles revealing a special bond. "You have her smile," Zara observed, "and her stubbornness, according to my father." Ethan's voice held that mixture of love and pain that Zara recognized from her own grief. She was brilliant, could have won a Fields Medal if she'd focused on research instead of teaching. Teaching was important to her? Essential. She believed knowledge wasn't meant to be hoarded. He gazed at the photograph, seeming to look beyond it to memories. Even as her illness progressed, she insisted on tutoring underprivileged kids, said it gave purpose to her suffering. Zara squeezed his hand, recognizing echoes of her own mother's dedication. "She sounds remarkable." "She would have liked you," Ethan said, turning to face her fully. "Your compassion, your commitment to your community, those were values she held dear." The moment felt weighted with significance, this sharing of their most precious memories, the linking of their pasts. Zara stood on tiptoe to kiss him gently, a wordless acknowledgement of the trust he was extending. The weekend unfolded in a peaceful rhythm unlike anything in their relationship so far. They cooked together in Ethan's rarely used gourmet kitchen, worked side by side, Zara reviewing client notes while Ethan answered emails, and spent hours simply talking, their conversations flowing effortlessly from professional challenges to childhood memories to philosophical debates. On Sunday morning, they lingered over coffee in the garden, enjoying the mild autumn sunshine. Ethan was midway through a story about his college roommate's disastrous attempt at homebrewing when his phone chimed with an incoming message. "Sorry," he said, glancing at the screen. His expression shifted subtly. "It's Harold Werner. He's asking if he can stop by this afternoon. Says he has some family papers of my mother's that he found while cleaning his office." "Dr. Werner from the gala?" Zara confirmed. "Don't change plans on my account. You wouldn't mind? I haven't seen him in months, and he rarely reaches out like this." "Of course I don't mind. He seemed like a good man, and obviously important to you." Ethan typed a quick reply, then set his phone aside. "He'll come around 4. That gives us plenty of time for that hike you mentioned wanting to try." The hike, a moderate trail through the nearby hills, was spectacular, offering views of the bay in the distance and the sprawling tech campuses that had transformed the area. They returned to the house pleasantly tired, sharing the oversized shower in Ethan's master bathroom in a way that left them both refreshed and slightly breathless. Dr. Werner arrived precisely at 4, carrying a leather document case that looked as aged as he was. He greeted Zara warmly, seeming unsurprised to find her there. "I hope I'm not interrupting your weekend," he said as Ethan led him to the living room. "Not at all," Ethan assured him. "Can I get you something to drink? Coffee? Something stronger?" "A scotch wouldn't go amiss," the older man admitted with a smile. "Just a small one." As Ethan went to the bar cart in the corner, Dr. Werner settled onto the sofa, placing the document case on the coffee table before him. "I was going through some old files. he explained to Zara. "Preparing to donate my papers to the medical school archives. I came across these items that Elizabeth had entrusted to me during her illness. I'm not sure why I held on to them all these years, but it seemed time to return them to the family." Ethan returned with 2 scotches and a glass of wine for Zara, sitting beside her on the love seat opposite Dr. Werner. "What kind of papers?" he asked, curiosity evident in his voice. Dr. Werner opened the case and carefully extracted a bundle of letters tied with faded blue ribbon, along with a small journal bound in worn leather. "Correspondence primarily. Your mother was an avid letter writer, even in the age of email, and this journal from her graduate school days at MIT. Ethan accepted the items with reverent hands. "I had no idea these existed." "Elizabeth was a private person in many ways," Dr. Werner said, sipping his scotch. "She asked me to keep these safe, said someday you might want to know more about her early life. I think she meant for you to have them when you were older, but then her condition deteriorated so rapidly." "Thank you for preserving them," Ethan said sincerely, his fingers tracing the cover of the journal. Dr. Werner's gaze shifted to Zara. "I've been thinking about our conversation at the gala, Dr. Matthews, about coincidences and names. It led me to find these materials." "Oh?" Zara asked, uncertain of the connection. "Elizabeth's closest friend at MIT was indeed named Eliza," he confirmed. "They were inseparable for several years, both brilliant mathematicians, both challenging the male-dominated field in their own ways." "That's a remarkable coincidence," Zara said. "That the school where my mother worked was named after someone with the same name as Ethan's mother's friend." Dr. Werner nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. "Life is full of such interesting intersections." "Did you know this Eliza?" Ethan asked, his attention now fully engaged. "I met her several times," Dr. Werner confirmed. "A formidable intellect. She and your mother had a falling out eventually, something about academic rivalry or ethical disagreements Elizabeth never fully explained. But for a time, they were like sisters." "Is there mention of her in the journal?" Ethan asked, holding the book but not yet opening it. "I believe so. Elizabeth's journal covers 1981 through 1983, her most productive academic years, and also when she met your father." Dr. Werner finished his scotch and set the glass down. "I should let you explore these materials in private. They're quite personal." "You don't have to rush off," Ethan protested. "I have dinner plans with my daughter's family," Dr. Werner said, rising, "but I'm glad to have finally returned these to you, and pleased to see you looking so well, Ethan. Happier than you've been in some time, I think." His knowing glance between Ethan and Zara made clear what, or rather who, he credited for this change. After showing Dr. Werner out, Ethan returned to the living room where Zara still sat, curious but hesitant to intrude on what felt like a deeply personal moment. "Do you want some time alone with these?" she offered. Ethan shook his head, sitting close beside her with the journal in his hands. "No, I'd like to share this with you if that's okay. It feels important somehow." "Of course," she said softly. Carefully, Ethan opened the journal to its first page. The handwriting was elegant and precise, much like the woman Zara had seen in the photograph. The entry was dated September 5th, 1981, first day of the fall semester, and already Eliza and I are planning our attack on Hoffman's theoretical framework. He called our summer paper ambitious but ultimately flawed, code for impressive for women. We'll show him flawed. E has proposed a completely novel approach to the matrix problem that could upend his entire methodology. Ethan continued reading silently, his expression shifting between amusement and sadness at glimpsing this younger, vibrant version of his mother, the woman she had been before illness defined her. "She sounds amazing," Zara said when he paused. "So passionate about her work." "She was," Ethan confirmed, flipping forward several pages. "She mentions this Eliza in almost every entry. They were collaborating on research that sounds like it was ahead of its time." He continued scanning until an entry from March 1982 caught his attention. Eliza is impossible lately. Her insistence on publishing our findings immediately is short-sighted. Yes, we could claim priority, but the application to weapons systems is too obvious. We need to develop ethical constraints first. Our most heated argument yet. She called me naive. I called her reckless. James tried to mediate, but this cuts to the core of what we believe about scientific responsibility. James was my father, Ethan explained. They were dating by this point. Zara leaned against his shoulder as he continued paging through the journal, stopping occasionally to read entries that mentioned research breakthroughs or personal milestones. The friendship between Elizabeth and Eliza seemed to deteriorate over the course of the year, their academic disagreement escalating into a personal rift. A final entry in July 1983 caught both their attention. Eliza left for Chicago today. She claims the visiting professorship is a great opportunity, but we both know she's running from the fallout. The department's decision to advance my approach rather than hers was fair. The ethical implications demanded caution. I will miss her brilliance, her fire, even her stubbornness. Perhaps someday she'll understand that I fought not against her, but for principles larger than either of us. James says I should reach out, but some bridges once burned cannot be rebuilt. Ethan stared at the entry, rereading it several times. Chicago, he said finally. Your mother's school was in Chicago. South Side, Zara nodded. But it must be coincidence. Dr. Werner said this Eliza was a mathematician at MIT. My mother's school was named after a civil rights activist from the 1960s. Different women entirely. Of course, Ethan agreed, though something in his expression suggested uncertainty. Still, it's strange that Dr. Werner would suddenly remember these papers after our conversation about Eliza Nichols. Perhaps the name just triggered his memory about your mother's friend, Zara suggested reasonably. Probably. Ethan closed the journal and gathered the letters, placing them carefully back in the document case. I'll read through these more thoroughly later. It's a lot to process, seeing her voice preserved like this, so alive and passionate. Zara understood completely. After her own mother's death, finding an old calendar with her handwritten appointments had reduced her to tears, the familiar slant of her script a ghost of presence on the page. Thank you for sharing this with me, she said, taking his hand. It means a lot that you'd let me be part of this discovery. Ethan's eyes, when they met hers, held a depth of emotion that made her breath catch. You've become essential to me so quickly, he said softly. I want to share everything with you. My past, my present, my future. The weight of his words hung between them, both thrilling and terrifying in their implication. They'd known each other barely 2 months, yet Zara couldn't deny the profundity of their connection. What had begun as a chance encounter on a plane had developed into something that felt increasingly like the foundation of a shared life. I feel the same way, she admitted, the truth of it settling in her chest like a warm certainty. He kissed her then, tender and questioning at first, then with growing intensity that communicated everything words couldn't yet express. When they finally drew apart, Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if memorizing the moment. Stay, he whispered. Not just tonight, stay tomorrow too. Work from here. I can drive you back to Oakland on Tuesday morning. I have client sessions tomorrow afternoon, she reminded him gently. I know, but you could do your morning paperwork here. Drive back with me for your afternoon appointments. His eyes opened, vulnerable and hopeful. I'm not ready for this weekend to end. The sensible part of Zara knew she should maintain some boundaries, keep their relationship from accelerating too quickly. But her heart, and the rest of her, wanted nothing more than to extend their time in this peaceful bubble they'd created. Okay, she agreed, feeling reckless and perfectly right at the same time. But you have to promise not to distract me when I'm working on case notes. His smile was both grateful and mischievous. I promise to try. Later that evening, as they prepared dinner together, Ethan seemed slightly preoccupied, pausing occasionally as if lost in thought. When Zara asked if he was worried about something, he shook his head. Not worried. Just thinking about my mother. About how life takes such unexpected turns. He set down the knife he'd been using to chop vegetables and turned to face her. If she hadn't gotten sick, I might never have developed the healthcare algorithm that started Hamilton Tech. And if I hadn't started the company, hadn't been stressed about that acquisition meeting, you might never have been downgraded to seat 9B. Zara finished for him. And we might never have met. Exactly. He touched her face gently. It makes me wonder about all the invisible threads connecting us to our pasts, to each other. Maybe nothing is truly coincidence. Now you sound like a mystic, not a tech CEO, she teased. Don't tell my board of directors, he laughed, returning to his chopping. They prefer to think I'm ruthlessly logical at all times. But as they moved through the evening, Zara noticed him glancing occasionally at the document case Dr. Werner had brought, as if it contained answers to questions he hadn't yet thought to ask. 2 weeks after their weekend in Palo Alto, Zara found herself thinking about Elizabeth Hamilton's journal at unexpected moments. Something about the story of Elizabeth and her friend Eliza nagged at her, a loose thread in an otherwise perfect tapestry. She and Ethan had settled into a comfortable rhythm, spending 3 or 4 nights a week together, alternating between her apartment in Oakland and his home in Palo Alto. Their relationship had deepened with a naturalness that still sometimes took Zara by surprise. Ethan had integrated himself into her life as if he'd always belonged there, charming her colleagues at the clinic, remembering her clients' stories without ever breaching confidentiality, finding the perfect balance between supporting her work and respecting her independence. For her part, Zara had become familiar with the rhythms of his high-pressure career, learning when to offer comfort during stressful periods and when to give him space to work through complex problems. Earth to Zara, Kendra's voice broke through her thoughts. You're a million miles away, girl. Zara blinked, focusing on her friend across the table at their favorite Oakland coffee shop. They'd been meeting for Tuesday morning coffee for years, a ritual that had survived job changes, relationships, and even Kendra's year-long sabbatical in Ghana. Sorry, Zara said, wrapping her hands around her cooling mug. Got lost in thought. Thoughts about your sexy CEO, I'm guessing? Kendra grinned. That smile you get is pretty specific. Actually, I was thinking about his mother. Kendra raised an eyebrow. Well, that's an unexpected turn. Zara explained about Dr. Werner's visit and the journal entries they'd discovered. It's probably nothing, but there's something about the timing that feels significant. This Eliza moved to Chicago in 1983, and my mother's school is named after an Eliza Nichols who was active in civil rights there. Could be coincidence, Kendra said thoughtfully. Eliza isn't the most common name, but it's not unheard of either. That's what we thought. But I keep coming back to Dr. Werner's reaction when I mentioned Eliza Nichols Academy at the gala. He seemed startled. Have you asked your father about it? Maybe he knows more about the woman the school was named after. Zara shook her head. We barely speak these days, and honestly, I'm not sure what I'd even be asking. Hey Dad, did Mom ever mention knowing a brilliant mathematician from MIT? When you put it that way, it does sound a bit reaching, Kendra conceded. But if it's bothering you this much, maybe it's worth doing a little research. The school must have archives, information about its namesake. Maybe, Zara sipped her latte. It just feels weird to be investigating something without telling Ethan, like I don't trust him. Do you trust him? Completely, Zara said without hesitation. That's what makes this whole thing so strange. I have no reason to doubt anything about him or his family. Yet I can't shake this feeling that there's a connection we're missing. Kendra studied her friend thoughtfully. You know, sometimes intuition picks up on things our conscious mind hasn't processed yet. Maybe your subconscious is trying to tell you something. Or maybe I'm just creating drama because everything has been so perfect. Zara laughed ruefully. Self-sabotage is a real thing. True, Kendra acknowledged. But so is gut instinct. You're usually pretty good at telling the difference. Later that day, between client sessions, Zara found herself Googling Eliza Nichols' Chicago civil rights. The search returned several articles about educational initiatives in Chicago's South Side during the 1960s and 70s, with mentions of an Eliza Nichols who had advocated for equal access to quality education. One article included a grainy black-and-white photograph from 1972, a group of activists standing on the steps of a community center. The caption identified Eliza Nichols as the third from left, a tall woman with a commanding presence even in the faded image. Something about her posture, the tilt of her head, seemed strangely familiar to Zara, though she couldn't place why. She scrolled further, finding a short biographical entry on the Chicago Public Schools website about the Academy's namesake. Eliza Nichols, 1945-2005, was a tireless advocate for educational equity in Chicago's underserved communities. With degrees in mathematics and education from the University of Chicago, she devoted her career to improving STEM education for minority students. The academy named in her honor continues her legacy of academic excellence and community engagement. Zara stared at the screen, her heart suddenly racing. Mathematics. The Eliza Nichols her mother's school was named after had been a mathematician, just like Elizabeth Hamilton's friend from MIT. And the timeline fit. If she'd earned her degrees from the University of Chicago, she could have been at MIT in the early 1980s as a visiting researcher or faculty member. Before she could pursue this line of thought further, her office phone rang. Her next client had arrived. Zara closed the browser window and took a deep breath, centering herself to be fully present for the session ahead. The mystery of Eliza Nichols would have to wait. That evening, Ethan came to her apartment for dinner, bringing takeout from her favorite Ethiopian restaurant and a bottle of wine they'd discovered they both loved. As they settled on her couch after the meal, Ethan's phone chimed with an email alert. "Sorry," he said, glancing at the screen. "I'm waiting to hear about a potential security issue with one of our healthcare platforms." "Of course, go ahead," Zara encouraged him. His expression shifted as he read the message, relaxing visibly. "False alarm, thankfully. One of our security protocols flagged an unusual access pattern, but it was just a system administrator running routine maintenance." He set the phone aside. "Crisis averted." "That's a relief," Zara said. "Your company handles a lot of sensitive medical data, right?" "Millions of patient records," Ethan nodded. "The security team is incredibly vigilant, sometimes to the point of paranoia, but it's necessary. One breach could be catastrophic, not just for Hamilton Tech, but for the patients whose privacy we're responsible for protecting." "It must be a huge weight," Zara observed, thinking of her own much smaller burden of confidentiality with her therapy clients. "It is, but it's also why our work is so important. The algorithms we're developing can identify patterns across vast data sets that might save lives, warning signs for adverse drug interactions, early indicators of disease progression that a human physician might miss." His eyes lit up as they always did when he spoke about his work. "But it's only ethically defensible if we maintain absolute data security." "The ethical implications were important to your mother too," Zara said, remembering the journal entries. "That seemed to be at the heart of her disagreement with her friend Eliza." Ethan nodded, a shadow crossing his features. "I've been reading more of her journal. Their conflict was about the potential weaponization of their mathematical models. Eliza wanted to publish immediately, while my mother worried about military applications." "Have you found anything else about what happened to Eliza after she moved to Chicago?" "Not in the journal. Mom stopped writing in it around the time she got engaged to my father." He gave her a curious look. "Why do you ask?" Zara hesitated, uncertain whether to share her afternoon's research. "I was just thinking about coincidences again," she said finally. "I looked up Eliza Nichols, the woman my mother's school was named after. She was a mathematician who focused on STEM education in Chicago." Ethan's eyebrows rose. "That is quite a coincidence." The biographical information said she had degrees from the University of Chicago, but it doesn't mention MIT. Still, the timing would work if she'd been there in the early 80s as a visiting scholar or something similar. You think it might be the same person? My mother's Eliza and you're Eliza Nichols? I don't know, Zara admitted. It seems far-fetched, and even if it were true, it would just be an interesting connection, right? Not particularly meaningful to us now. Ethan was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. I suppose, he said finally, though it would be a remarkable coincidence that we would meet on that plane of all people. What are you thinking? Zara asked, sensing his hesitation. Just that life is strange sometimes. Connections we never anticipated. He smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. Maybe the universe has a sense of humor. Or a sense of poetry, Zara suggested. Ethan pulled her closer, kissing the top of her head. Either way, I'm grateful for whatever cosmic forces put you in seat 9A. They let the subject drop, turning instead to planning a weekend trip to Napa that Ethan had proposed. But later, as they prepared for bed, Zara noticed him checking his phone with unusual frequency, his brow furrowed in concentration. Everything okay? She asked as she applied her nighttime moisturizer. Oh yes. Just asking Dr. Werner a question about my mother's papers. He set the phone on the nightstand. Nothing urgent. Zara nodded, but something in his tone made her wonder if he was pursuing the same questions that had been occupying her thoughts. The next morning, Zara woke early, careful not to disturb Ethan, who was still sleeping deeply beside her. She slipped out of bed and made coffee, taking her mug to the small balcony that was her favorite feature of the apartment. As the sun rose over Oakland, she found herself thinking about her mother, her unwavering dedication to her students, her quiet strength during her illness, the values she had instilled in her only daughter. Catherine Matthews had rarely spoken about her life before becoming a teacher and eventually a principal. Zara knew the broad strokes, that she'd earned her education degree at the University of Illinois, that she'd taught math before moving into administration, that she'd met Zara's father while they were both working at an after-school program. But the details were sparse, and Zara had never thought to ask for more when her mother was alive. Now she found herself wishing she knew more about the connection between Catherine Matthews and Eliza Nichols. Had they been colleagues? Friends? Was it merely professional respect that had led her mother to accept the principalship at a school named after the civil rights educator? The sliding door opened behind her, and Ethan stepped onto the balcony, his hair mussed from sleep, wearing only the pajama bottoms he kept at her place. "You're up early," he observed, bending to kiss her shoulder. "Couldn't sleep," she admitted. "Thinking about the Eliza connection." Zara looked up, surprised by his perception. "How did you know?" "Because I've been thinking about it too." He took the chair beside her, his expression serious. "Dr. Werner got back to me last night. He confirmed that my mother's friend was indeed Eliza Nichols, who later became known for her work in educational equity in Chicago." Zara's coffee mug froze halfway to her lips. "So it is the same woman, apparently." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his discomfort. "Werner knew her full name all along but didn't make the connection to your mother's school until our conversation at the gala." "That's quite a coincidence," Zara said, echoing his words from the night before. "Is it, though?" Ethan's gaze was intent. "What are the odds that we would meet? The son of Elizabeth Hamilton and someone connected to Eliza Nichols. It feels almost deliberate somehow." "What are you suggesting? That fate brought us together because of our mother's connection?" "Not fate," Ethan said slowly. "But maybe not pure chance either." Zara set her mug down, suddenly cold despite the morning sunshine. "Ethan, what exactly are you asking?" He reached for her hand, his touch gentle but his eyes troubled. "I'm not accusing you of anything, Zara. I'm just trying to understand if there's more to how we met than we realized. You think I engineered our meeting somehow? That I deliberately sat next to you on that plane because of who your mother was?" The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. "No," he said quickly. "No, that's not what I meant. I don't know what I meant." He sighed heavily. "I'm handling this badly." "You are," she agreed, pulling her hand away. "Because there's nothing to handle. We met by chance. The connection between our mothers, if there even is one beyond a professional disagreement 40 years ago, has nothing to do with us." "You're right," Ethan said, rubbing his face. "I'm sorry. I didn't sleep well, and my mind went down a rabbit hole. Please forgive me." Zara wanted to let it go, to accept his apology and move forward. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and she could see it taking root in Ethan's eyes despite his words. Something had shifted between them, subtle but undeniable. "I think maybe we both need some space to process this," she said finally. "You have meetings in the city today anyway, right?" Ethan nodded, his expression a mixture of regret and relief. "I do. But we're still on for Napa this weekend?" "Of course," Zara said, managing a smile that felt brittle around the edges. "This is just a strange situation. We'll figure it out." But as she watched him dress and prepare to leave, Zara couldn't shake the feeling that they had crossed some invisible threshold, and whatever lay on the other side would test the foundation they had built together. The drive to Napa that Friday afternoon was quieter than usual. Despite their mutual promise to focus on enjoying the weekend, the unresolved questions about their mother's connection lingered between them like an uninvited passenger. Ethan drove with one hand on the wheel, the other occasionally reaching over to touch Zara's knee or hold her hand, physical reassurances that carried a hint of desperation. "I booked us for dinner at that farm-to-table place you mentioned wanting to try," he said as they passed through Vallejo. "The one with the female chef who trained in Paris." "Sounds lovely," Zara replied, summoning a smile. "Thank you for remembering." "Of course I remembered. I remember everything you tell me." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "Zara, about Wednesday morning, we don't need to rehash it," she said quickly. "You apologized, I accepted. Let's just enjoy our weekend." Ethan nodded, though his grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. I want you to know that I never seriously thought you had some ulterior motive for meeting me. The whole thing just caught me off guard." "I understand," Zara said, and she did. The coincidence, if that's what it was, had unsettled her too. "It's strange for both of us. Did you learn anything more from your research about Eliza Nichols?" Zara hesitated. She had, in fact, spent much of Wednesday afternoon and Thursday diving deeper into the history of the woman her mother's school was named after. But sharing that felt like reopening a wound they were both trying to heal. "A bit," she admitted finally. "I found an oral history interview she gave to the Chicago Historical Society in the 90s. She mentioned spending time at MIT in the early 80s as a visiting fellow, collaborating on mathematical modeling projects with brilliant colleagues who didn't always share her vision for practical applications." Ethan absorbed this, his eyes fixed on the road ahead. "That certainly aligns with my mother's journal. Did she mention Elizabeth specifically?" "No. No names were mentioned, but she did talk about returning to Chicago to focus on education after becoming disillusioned with pure academic research." "Because of ethical disagreements?" "She didn't specify, just said she felt her mathematical talents could make a more direct impact in underserved communities." They fell silent again as the highway curved through golden hills dotted with oak trees, the landscape gradually giving way to the geometric precision of vineyard rows. Despite the tension between them, Zara couldn't help but admire the beauty of the late autumn scenery, the vines turning russet and gold as they prepared for winter dormancy. Their accommodations, a boutique hotel nestled among the vineyards, were as perfect as Ethan's meticulous planning had promised. Their suite featured a private terrace overlooking the valley, a soaking tub large enough for two, and a bottle of the estate's reserve Cabernet waiting for them upon arrival. "This is beautiful," Zara said sincerely as she stepped out onto the terrace. "Thank you for arranging it." Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "I almost canceled," he admitted quietly. "After Wednesday, I wasn't sure if you'd still want to come." Zara turned in his arms to face him. "Why wouldn't I?" "We had a disagreement, Ethan. It happens in relationships." "Is that what we have? A relationship?" His tone was light, but his eyes searched hers intently. "What would you call it?" "I'd call it the most important thing in my life right now," he said simply. The raw honesty in his voice melted some of the tension Zara had been carrying. She reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "For me too," she whispered. Their kiss was tentative at first, as if they were both testing whether the connection between them had truly survived their first conflict. But as Ethan's arms tightened around her, Zara felt the familiar heat building between them, the physical chemistry that had been undeniable from their very first meeting. Later, lying tangled in the luxurious sheets, Zara felt a profound sense of relief. Whatever complications existed in their history, the present moment, this connection was real and worth protecting. "We should get ready for dinner," Ethan murmured, though he made no move to release her from his embrace. We should," she agreed, equally reluctant to leave the bubble they'd recreated. Eventually, they managed to dress for dinner, Ethan in tailored dark slacks and a slate blue shirt that brought out his eyes, Zara in a burgundy wrap dress that complemented the wine country setting. The restaurant lived up to its reputation, serving exquisite dishes crafted from local ingredients, each course paired with a perfectly chosen wine. By the time they were savoring the last bites of a shared chocolate soufflé, the awkwardness from earlier had been replaced by their usual easy conversation. "I called my father yesterday," Zara said as they sipped espresso, deciding it was time to bring what she'd learned into the open. Ethan's eyebrows rose in surprise. "You did? I thought you weren't close." "We're not, really, but I wanted to ask him about my mother's connection to Eliza Nichols." She took a deep breath. "He told me something I hadn't known before. My mother didn't just happen to work at a school named after Eliza Nichols. She specifically sought out the position because of who Nichols was." "Did he say why?" "Not in detail. He just said that my mother had great respect for Eliza's work and wanted to be part of continuing her legacy." Zara hesitated. "But there was something in his tone. I got the impression there was more to the story than he was telling me." "Did you press him on it?" "I tried. But you know how these strained parent-child relationships go. He got defensive, said it was all ancient history and didn't matter anymore." She sighed. "Then he changed the subject to whether I was seeing anyone special, and I wasn't ready to tell him about you, so—" "I understand," Ethan said, though Zara detected a hint of hurt in his eyes. "It's complicated. It's not because I'm not serious about you," she assured him quickly. "It's just that my father and I barely talk as it is. Explaining that I'm dating a tech CEO who might have a mysterious connection to my mother's past seemed like too much for a random Thursday phone call." Ethan's expression softened. "When you put it that way, it does sound a bit soap operatic." "Exactly." He reached across the table to take her hand. "I did some digging, too. I found my mother's academic papers from that period. Her collaboration with Eliza Nichols is clearly credited in several of them. They were working on advanced predictive algorithms using matrix theory. Pretty groundbreaking stuff for the early 80s. "Predictive algorithms?" Zara repeated, surprised. "Like the ones your company develops?" "Similar underlying mathematical principles, though obviously much less sophisticated without modern computing power. But the foundation?" He shook his head slightly. The foundation of what became Hamilton Tech's core technology was there in their early work. That's remarkable, Zara said carefully. Have you always known this? Not consciously, no. I was just a kid when my mother was teaching me programming. She never mentioned that the mathematical models she showed me had originated in her work with Eliza. But looking at these papers now, his eyes met hers across the table. I've built my entire career on an extension of their collaborative research. The implications hung between them, unspoken but unavoidable. If Elizabeth and Eliza's mathematical work had formed the basis of Hamilton Tech's technology, and if Zara's mother had deliberately sought out a connection to Eliza Nichols years later, were her and Ethan's paths somehow predestined to cross? What do we do with this information? Zara asked finally. I don't know, Ethan admitted. Part of me wants to dig deeper, understand the full story, and part of me wants to focus on us, on our present and future, regardless of how our paths may have been influenced by the past. I feel the same way. She squeezed his hand. But I think we need to know the truth, whatever it is. Otherwise, it will always be this question mark hanging over us. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of the check. Outside the restaurant, the night air was cool and fragrant with the scent of late-blooming roses climbing the nearby trellis. Ethan wrapped his arm around Zara's shoulders as they walked toward their hotel, both quiet with their thoughts. Back in their suite, they opened the terrace doors to let in the night air, settling on the outdoor love seat with glasses of port the hotel had left as a turned-down amenity. Above them, stars punctuated the clear country sky with a brilliance rarely visible in the city. When I was a kid, Ethan said softly, my mother used to tell me that mathematics was the language of the universe, that every pattern we see, from the spiral of a seashell to the orbit of planets, can be expressed in equations. She sounds like she was a wonderful teacher, Zara said. She was. After she got sick, when she couldn't work at MIT anymore, she'd have me bring her puzzles and problems to solve. Said it kept her mind sharp even as her body was failing. He took a sip of port. I started writing code for her ideas when I was 15, simple programs at first, but getting more complex as I learned. Looking back now, I realize she was teaching me to build something that would outlast her. Hamilton Tech, Zara whispered. Ethan nodded. The core predictive algorithm that started it all. I always thought it was something we created together. But now I wonder how much of it came from her earlier work with Eliza. Does it matter? You've taken it so much further than they could have imagined. It might matter legally in terms of intellectual property. But more than that, he gazed up at the stars. I wonder if my mother intended for me to find Eliza someday, to reconnect the threads they'd broken. Zara considered this. And if your mother's friend Eliza influenced my mother so strongly? It's like we're completing a circuit they started, Ethan finished. But I still don't understand why they had such a falling out in the first place. What could have been so serious that they never reconciled? Academic rivalries can be intense, Zara suggested, though it felt like an inadequate explanation. Maybe, but there was something personal there too, I think. In her later journal entries, my mother's tone when mentioning Eliza shifts from frustration to something more like grief. They sat in companionable silence for a while, each lost in thought about the mysterious connection that seemed to be unfolding between their families. There's one more thing I learned, Zara said finally. Something odd that I'm not sure what to make of. Ethan turned to face her, his expression questioning. When I was researching Eliza Nichols online, I found her obituary from 2005. It mentioned that she was survived by her life partner of 30 years, a woman named Marie Fontaine. Zara took a breath. And when I spoke to my father, he let slip that my mother had been close friends with Marie before she met him. Ethan's eyes widened. So your mother knew Eliza's partner? Apparently. But when I asked more about it, my father shut down the conversation completely, said some things were better left in the past. That seems significant, Ethan said slowly. If your mother knew Eliza's partner, then the connection between our families is even closer than we thought." "Yes," Zara agreed. "And there's one more thing." She hesitated, uncertain whether to share what might be merely a coincidence. "In my mother's personal papers, which I went through after she died, there were several letters from Marie. The last one was dated just a month before my mother's diagnosis." "They stayed in touch all those years?" "It seems so. And in that last letter, Marie mentioned someone named Elizabeth who had found peace at last. At the time, I assumed it was just someone they both knew. But now you're wondering if she was referring to my mother," Ethan finished, his voice barely above a whisper. "It's possible. Your mother died in what, 2001? 2002, Ethan corrected. February 2002. And this letter was from April 2002. The timing would fit." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a gesture Zara now recognized as a sign of his agitation. "So Marie Fontaine knew both our mothers. She could be the missing link to understanding this whole connection. If she's still alive," Zara pointed out, "she'd be quite elderly by now. We should try to find her," Ethan said decisively. "If anyone knows the full story of what happened between my mother and Eliza, it would be her." Zara nodded, feeling both nervous and excited about the prospect of uncovering the truth. "I'll see if my father has any contact information for her, though I'm not sure he'll be willing to share it. I can have someone at Hamilton Tech look into it too," Ethan offered. "Discreetly, of course." The port forgotten, they moved inside to the suite's sitting area where Ethan opened his laptop. Together, they began searching for information about Marie Fontaine, each new discovery bringing them closer to understanding the mysterious intersection of their family histories. As midnight approached, Zara found herself both energized by their investigation and apprehensive about what they might discover. Whatever had caused the rift between Elizabeth Hamilton and Eliza Nichols had been significant enough to separate two brilliant colleagues and close friends. Would uncovering that truth strengthen her relationship with Ethan, or threaten the foundation they had built together? It took less than a week for Ethan's resources to locate Marie Fontaine. She was living in a retirement community in Santa Barbara, where she had moved after Eliza Nichols' death. At 86, she was still active in the community, volunteering at the local library and participating in a mathematics mentoring program for young girls. "She sounds remarkable," Zara said as they drove down the California coast the following Saturday. The trip to Santa Barbara had been hastily arranged, Ethan clearing his calendar with unprecedented flexibility, Zara asking colleagues to cover a handful of clients. "I'm nervous about meeting her," Ethan admitted, his hands tightening slightly on the steering wheel. "What if she tells us something we don't want to hear?" "Like what?" Zara asked, though similar concerns had kept her awake the night before. "I don't know exactly, but whatever happened between our mothers was serious enough that they never reconciled. What if it's something that changes how we see them, or each other?" Zara reached over to touch his arm reassuringly. "Whatever we learn, we'll deal with it together. I think we need to know, Ethan. For both our sakes." He nodded, covering her hand with his own briefly before returning it to the wheel. "You're right. I just can't shake this feeling that we're about to cross some threshold we can't return from." The retirement community was elegant and understated, situated on a hillside overlooking the Pacific. After checking in with security, they were directed to a small cottage at the edge of the property. A well-tended garden bordered the front path, late autumn roses still blooming in the mild coastal climate. Ethan reached for Zara's hand as they approached the door, their fingers interlacing in a gesture that had become automatic but never lost its sense of rightness. Before they could knock, the door opened, revealing a petite woman with silver hair cut in a stylish bob, her dark eyes sharp behind tortoiseshell glasses. "I've been expecting you," Marie Fontaine said, her voice strong despite her years, though I must admit not quite like this. Her gaze moved between them, lingering on their joined hands with a mixture of surprise and something that might have been recognition. "Ms. Fontaine," Ethan began, "thank you for agreeing to see us. I'm Ethan Hamilton and this is—" "Zara Matthews," Marie finished for him. "Catherine's daughter. I would know you anywhere. You have her eyes." She stepped back, gesturing for them to enter. "Come in, please, I've made tea." The cottage interior was bright and airy, filled with books and artwork that reflected a life richly lived. Marie led them to a sunroom at the back, where a tea service waited on a small table surrounded by comfortable chairs. Large windows overlooked a view of the ocean in the distance, framed by swaying palm trees. "You have a lovely home," Zara said as they settled into the chairs. "Thank you. Eliza and I always dreamed of retiring somewhere with an ocean view." Marie poured tea into delicate porcelain cups. "We had 10 good years here before she passed. Now tell me how you two found each other." The directness of her question took them both by surprise. Ethan explained their meeting on the plane, the coincidence of his downgraded seat, and how their relationship had developed before they began to discover the connections between their families. Marie listened attentively, her expression revealing nothing. When Ethan finished, she set her teacup down carefully and looked at Zara. "And you knew nothing of this connection before meeting Ethan?" "Nothing," Zara confirmed. "My mother rarely spoke about her life before becoming a teacher. I knew she admired Eliza Nichols, enough to specifically seek out a position at the academy named after her, but that's all." Marie nodded slowly. "Catherine was always protective of you, even before you were born. She wouldn't have wanted to burden you with old histories." "Before I was born?" Zara repeated, confused. "Did you know my mother that long?" A sad smile crossed Marie's face. "I knew your mother for over 30 years, dear, since before she met your father. Catherine, Eliza, and I were very close during a difficult time." "And you knew my mother too, Elizabeth Hamilton?" Ethan asked. "Yes, though not as well as Eliza did." Marie's gaze turned distant, as if looking into the past. "Elizabeth was brilliant, perhaps the most naturally gifted mathematician I've ever known besides Eliza. They were like twin stars, those two, radiant in each other's orbit, but ultimately on collision courses." "Because of their ethical disagreement about publishing their research?" Ethan prompted. Marie's eyebrows rose. "You know about that?" "My mother's journal mentioned it. She felt their mathematical models could be weaponized if published without constraints." "That was part of it," Marie acknowledged. "But the full story is more personal." She rose and went to a bookshelf, returning with a framed photograph that she handed to Ethan. MIT, 1982, the peak of their collaboration. The photograph showed 4 young women standing outside a brick building, arms linked, laughing at the camera. Ethan identified his mother immediately, her familiar eyes and smile preserved in the moment decades earlier. Beside her stood a tall black woman with a commanding presence whom he assumed was Eliza Nichols. On Eliza's other side was a younger Marie, her dark hair long then and streaked with premature silver. The 4th woman, standing beside Elizabeth, was unfamiliar to Ethan. "Your mother," Marie said to Zara, pointing to the 4th woman. Zara leaned closer, studying the image with surprise. "She looks so young." Catherine Matthews appeared to be in her early 20s in the photo, her smile wide and carefree in a way Zara had rarely seen. "What was she doing at MIT? She never mentioned studying there." "She wasn't a student," Marie explained. "She was working as a research assistant in the mathematics department while getting her education degree at Boston University. That's how she met Eliza, and all of us." Ethan stared at the photograph, absorbing the reality of their mother's connection. They all looked so happy here. They were, for a time. Marie took the photo back, her fingers lingering on the glass. "This was taken about 6 months before everything fell apart." "What happened?" Zara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marie set the photograph on the table between them, then resumed her seat, folding her hands in her lap. Before I tell you this story, I need to know something. How serious is this relationship between you two? Ethan and Zara exchanged glances, surprised by the question. Very serious, Ethan answered without hesitation. I love Zara. Whatever we learn today won't change that. The simple declaration sent warmth flooding through Zara's chest, even amid the tension of the moment. I feel the same way, she confirmed, reaching for his hand again. Marie studied them, her expression softening. I believe you. And that's good, because what I'm about to tell you will test that commitment. She took a deep breath. Elizabeth and Eliza weren't just research colleagues, they were in love. The statement hung in the air, unexpected and transformative. Ethan's grip on Zara's hand tightened reflexively. In love, he repeated. But my mother married my father in 1983, and Eliza was your partner for 30 years. Life is rarely neat and linear, Mr. Hamilton, Marie said gently. Yes, I was with Eliza for 3 decades after she returned to Chicago. And yes, your mother married James Hamilton. But before those chapters began, Elizabeth and Eliza had a passionate relationship that consumed them both, personally and professionally. I had no idea, Ethan murmured, clearly struggling to reconcile this new information with his understanding of his mother. They were very discreet, Marie explained. It was the early 1980s, and academia wasn't particularly welcoming to same-sex relationships, especially for women trying to establish themselves in a male-dominated field like mathematics. But those of us close to them knew. Where does my mother fit into this? Zara asked, still trying to make sense of Catherine's presence in the photograph. Marie hesitated. Catherine was caught in the middle when things fell apart. She was Eliza's friend first, but she was close with Elizabeth too. When the break happened, it was Catherine who tried to mediate to find some middle ground. The break being their disagreement about publishing their research? Ethan asked. That was the academic side of it, yes, Marie acknowledged. But there was more. Elizabeth met your father, James, at a university function. He was a rising star in engineering, handsome and ambitious. She was immediately drawn to him. She cheated on Eliza? Ethan's voice held a note of disbelief. It wasn't quite that simple, Marie said, her tone gentle but firm. Elizabeth was wrestling with her identity, with what a future with Eliza might mean for her career and family aspirations. James represented a more traditional path: marriage, children, societal acceptance. She was torn. And Eliza was hurt, Zara guessed. Devastated, Marie confirmed. She had been planning a life with Elizabeth. They had talked about moving to California together, continuing their research at Stanford or Berkeley. My mother never mentioned any of this, Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. Not in her journals, not to me, not to anyone as far as I know. She compartmentalized, Marie suggested. Many people of that generation did, especially regarding same-sex relationships. Once she committed to James and a traditional family life, she may have felt it necessary to lock that part of herself away. Zara's mind was racing, trying to fit this new information into what she knew of her own mother. I still don't understand Catherine's role in all this. Why was she so affected by their breakup that she'd later seek out a job at a school named after Eliza? Marie's expression grew more somber. Because Catherine made a choice too, one that altered all of their lives. She paused, seeming to consider her words carefully. When Elizabeth ended things with Eliza and became engaged to James, Eliza was inconsolable. She started working around the clock, determined to publish their research independently. Against my mother's wishes, Ethan said. Yes. Elizabeth believed their mathematical models needed safeguards before publication. Eliza, hurt and angry, disagreed. She accelerated her work, planning to publish first and establish primary credit. Academic betrayal on top of personal betrayal, Zara murmured. Marie nodded. Exactly. Elizabeth found out and confronted her. Their argument was witnessed by several colleagues. It became something of a scandal in the department. The next day, Eliza discovered that someone had accessed her office and taken her research notebooks. "My mother?" Ethan asked, his voice tight. That was the assumption, and perhaps it's what Elizabeth intended people to think. But it wasn't her. Marie turned to Zara, her eyes conveying the gravity of what she was about to reveal. It was Catherine. What? Zara sat back, stunned. My mother stole research? She believed she was protecting both women from themselves, Marie explained. Catherine knew that if Eliza published first, it would destroy any chance of reconciliation. And if their models were used for weapons development, as Elizabeth feared, both would live with that guilt forever. So she took matters into her own hands, Ethan said, understanding dawning in his eyes. Catherine destroyed the notebooks, Marie confirmed. Then she confessed to Eliza what she'd done. She thought Eliza would eventually understand, that her actions would force both women to step back and reconsider. But it backfired, Zara guessed, a knot forming in her stomach, catastrophically. Eliza felt betrayed by her closest friend. Elizabeth, when she learned what had happened, was horrified that Catherine had intervened so drastically. Within weeks, the entire friendship circle had imploded. Elizabeth married James and moved to Boston. Eliza accepted a position in Chicago where I eventually joined her, and Catherine, unable to face either of them, left academia entirely. The weight of this revelation settled over the sunroom. Outside, clouds had gathered, dimming the bright coastal sunshine and casting subtle shadows across their faces. Did they ever reconcile? Ethan asked after a long silence. Any of them? Marie sighed. Partially. Years later, when Catherine moved to Chicago with your father, Zara, she reached out to Eliza. It took time, but they eventually rebuilt a fragile friendship. Eliza's work in educational equity inspired Catherine's teaching career. When the academy was named after Eliza, Catherine applied to honor the woman who had shaped her professional path despite their complicated history. And my mother? Ethan pressed. Did she and Eliza ever speak again? Once, Marie said softly, when Elizabeth was diagnosed with MS. She wrote to Eliza, seeking closure before her health declined further. Eliza visited her in Boston. I don't know exactly what was said between them. Eliza never shared the details, even with me, but she returned more at peace than I'd seen her in years. Zara's mind was spinning with questions. Marie, you said my mother was protective of me even before I was born. What did you mean by that? Marie hesitated, her gaze moving between Zara and Ethan. Perhaps that's a conversation for another time. You've both learned a great deal today, and some revelations should be, well, approached more carefully. Please, Zara insisted. We've come this far. I need to understand. The older woman studied her face, then nodded slowly. Very well, but remember, you asked for this truth. She took a deep breath. After Catherine moved to Chicago, she and Eliza cautiously renewed their friendship. Eliza had established herself at the University of Chicago by then, and I had joined her. The three of us became close again. And? Zara prompted when Marie paused. When Catherine decided she wanted a child, she asked Eliza to help her find a suitable donor. Marie's eyes locked with Zara's. Someone with intelligence, integrity, and good health. Someone like the brilliant man Eliza had once loved deeply, even after their paths diverged. The implication hung in the air for a heartbeat before Ethan gasped softly beside her. Zara turned to him, seeing her own shock reflected in his widening eyes. Are you saying? Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. I'm saying, Marie replied gently, that James Hamilton was your biological father, Zara. Your mother's choice of sperm donor was perhaps her final attempt to weave together the broken threads of that extraordinary friendship. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Zara's hand slipped from Ethan's as if burned. The physical connection suddenly loaded with unimaginable new meaning. Half-siblings. They were half-siblings. The same blood ran in their veins. The same man had contributed to their genetic makeup. The nausea hit her in waves, memories of their intimacy flashing through her mind with sickening new context. "That's not possible," Ethan said, his voice strained to breaking. "My father he wouldn't have donated." "Not knowingly," Marie clarified, her tone gentle but unflinching. Eliza approached a colleague at the fertility clinic where James had made a deposit years earlier, when he and Elizabeth were having difficulty conceiving you, Ethan. Patient confidentiality was less stringent then, especially for someone with Eliza's persuasive abilities. "You're saying she stole his... Ethan couldn't finish the sentence. "She circumvented proper protocols," Marie acknowledged. "Eliza could be ruthlessly determined when she believed in something, and she believed Catherine deserved to have a child with exceptional genes." "Did my father know?" Zara asked, her voice barely audible. "Gary Matthews, did he know I wasn't biologically his?" Marie nodded. "Catherine was honest with him before they married. He accepted you as his own from the beginning, loved you completely. But he never told me." The betrayal cut deep. Another secret, another lie by omission that had shaped her life without her knowledge or consent. "Your parents agreed it was simpler this way," Marie said. "And for what it's worth, James Hamilton never knew either. Elizabeth suspected, I think, but she never confronted Catherine directly about it." Zara stood abruptly, needing distance, air, perspective. Anything to ground herself in a reality that had suddenly become unrecognizable. She moved to the window, staring out at the ocean without really seeing it. Behind her, she could hear Ethan's controlled breathing, the same technique she had taught him on the plane that now seemed a lifetime ago. "Why tell us now?" Ethan asked, his voice hollow. "You could have let us continue in ignorance." "Could I?" Marie countered gently. "You came to me together, clearly in love, asking about your mother's connection. What would you have had me do? Lie? Allow you to continue a romantic relationship as half-siblings?" Zara pressed her forehead against the cool glass of the window, closing her eyes against tears that threatened to spill. The ethical implications were clear, the path forward devastatingly obvious, but her heart refused to align with this new reality, still clinging to what she had believed to be true just minutes before. "There must be some mistake," she whispered, though she knew in her core there wasn't. The coincidences, the mysterious connections, the strange sense of recognition she'd felt with Ethan from their first meeting, all of it suddenly made terrible sense. "I wish there were," Marie said softly. "Catherine confided in me when she became pregnant. Eliza was proud of what she'd arranged, though she swore me to secrecy. It wasn't until years later that I realized the full implications of what had been done." "Does anyone else know?" Ethan asked. "Only the colleague who helped Eliza access the samples, and she passed away years ago. After Catherine died, I became the sole keeper of this particular secret." Marie's voice carried the weight of that burden. "I never imagined you two would find each other, let alone become involved." The silence that descended was thick with shock, grief, and confusion. Outside, the gray clouds had darkened further, mirroring the shadow that had fallen over what had, mere hours ago, seemed like a quest for interesting family history rather than a life-altering revelation. "I think we should go," Ethan said finally, standing. His face was carefully composed, but Zara could see the devastation in his eyes, the rigid control he was exerting to maintain his outward calm. Marie rose as well, moving with the careful dignity of her years. "I understand this is overwhelming. Take whatever time you need to process it. I'm here if you have more questions." "Thank you for your honesty," Ethan said mechanically, the polite words at odds with the turmoil he must be feeling. Zara merely nodded, unable to summon words of gratitude for information that had just shattered her world. Marie approached her, placing a gentle hand on her arm. "Catherine loved you more than anything in this world," the older woman said softly. "Whatever you may think of her choices, never doubt that." Zara met her eyes, seeing compassion and regret in equal measure. "She should have told me the truth." "Perhaps," Marie acknowledged, "but we all make choices we believe protect those we love." She pressed a small envelope into Zara's hand. "When you're ready, this might help you understand her perspective better." The drive back from Santa Barbara began in complete silence. Rain had started to fall, streaming across the windshield in wavering lines that blurred the coastal landscape. Ethan drove with mechanical precision, his eyes fixed on the road, his posture rigid. The space between them in the car felt simultaneously vast and claustrophobically intimate. Halfway back to Los Angeles, Zara finally broke the silence. "We need to talk about this." Ethan's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I don't know what to say." "Neither do I. But sitting in silence isn't helping." She took a deep breath. I don't even have words for what I'm feeling." "Violated," Ethan suggested, his voice tight, "by choices made decades before we were born that have completely upended our lives." "Yes," Zara agreed. "That's part of it." "And disgusted," he continued, the word sharp with self-recrimination. "I know." Zara wrapped her arms around herself, feeling suddenly cold despite the car's heating. "But we didn't know. Does that matter? Now that we do know, everything changes." His voice cracked slightly. "Everything has to change." The finality in his tone broke something in Zara. Tears she'd been holding back spilled over, silent but unstoppable. Of course, their romantic relationship had to end. That wasn't in question. But the loss felt unbearable, a cruel cosmic joke that had allowed her to find such profound connection only to reveal it was founded on an impossible taboo. "I don't regret meeting you," she said quietly after her tears had subsided. "Whatever else this means, I can't regret knowing you." Ethan's rigid control softened slightly. "I don't regret it either, but I wish—" He trailed off, the multitude of wishes too overwhelming to articulate. They stopped at a roadside diner just north of Ventura, both needing space from the confines of the car. The place was nearly empty, a few truckers at the counter, a family with tired children in a corner booth. They chose a table by the window, the rain still pattering against the glass. "What was in the envelope Marie gave you?" Ethan asked after they'd ordered coffee neither of them really wanted. Zara retrieved it from her purse. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a handwritten letter dated just weeks before her mother's death. "Dearest Marie, as my time grows short, I find myself reflecting on the choices that have shaped my life. The greatest of these, without question, was my decision to bring Zara into this world. I have never for a moment regretted becoming her mother, though I regret that I must leave her too soon. I know you have kept our secret faithfully all these years. Perhaps one day, when Zara is older and I am gone, she will need to know the truth of her origins. If that day comes, please help her understand that what might seem like deception or manipulation was, in my heart, an act of healing, an attempt to create something beautiful from the wreckage of our broken circle. Elizabeth has found peace at last in her final journey. Eliza has her work and you. James has his success and his son. I have had Zara, and through her, a connection to all that might have been. It has been enough, more than enough." With love and gratitude, Catherine Zara passed the letter to Ethan, watching his face as he read her mother's final reflection. His expression softened, the anger giving way momentarily to something more complex. "She never intended us to meet," he said after finishing the letter. "None of them could have predicted this particular outcome." "No," Zara agreed. "How could they? It's so far beyond the realm of normal probability." Ethan handed the letter back. Yet it happened anyway. Out of all the flights, all the seats, all the possible configurations of our lives, we found each other. Only to lose each other immediately, Zara said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Their coffee arrived, providing a momentary distraction. Ethan added cream to his, stirring it mechanically as he gathered his thoughts. "We don't have to lose everything," he said finally. "The romantic relationship has to end. We both know that, but there's still connection. Biology aside, I've never felt such immediate understanding with anyone. That can't all be attributed to shared genetics." "What are you suggesting? That we try to be friends? Siblings?" The words felt strange in her mouth, inadequate to describe the complex reality of their situation. "I don't know," he admitted. "I don't have a roadmap for this, but cutting each other out of our lives completely feels wrong too. We're the only two people who understand this bizarre intersection of families and fates." Zara considered this, trying to imagine a future where Ethan was in her life, but not as her lover. The prospect was both painful and somehow necessary, as if their strange, shared heritage created an obligation neither could easily ignore. "The telehealth project," she said suddenly. "The clinic partnership with Hamilton Tech. That work is important. It's helping real people. I don't want to abandon it just because our personal relationship has to change." Ethan nodded, seizing on this practical consideration with visible relief. "Absolutely. The project should continue. Your clinic's work is too valuable to be derailed by personal complications. So we find a way to maintain a professional connection at least." Zara wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, drawing comfort from its warmth. "The rest, I think we need time to process, separately." Agreed. His eyes met hers across the table, filled with a grief that mirrored her own. "I never imagined our search for answers would lead to this." "Neither did I." They finished their coffee in silence, each lost in private thoughts about paths not taken and futures suddenly foreclosed. When they returned to the car, the rain had stopped, though dark clouds still hung heavy overhead. The remainder of the drive passed more comfortably, if not easily. They discussed practical matters, how to handle the transition with their respective teams, the logistics of the ongoing telehealth project, who would communicate what to whom. These conversations, focused on concrete realities rather than emotional fallout, provided a temporary refuge from the deeper pain neither was ready to fully face. When Ethan finally pulled up in front of Zara's apartment building in Oakland, night had fallen, the streetlights casting pools of yellow illumination on the wet pavement. He put the car in park, but left the engine running, a clear signal that he wouldn't be coming up, that this was goodbye in more ways than one. "I'll have your things from my place packed up and delivered," he said softly, "and I'll collect mine next time you're at the clinic." "Okay." Zara's throat felt tight, inadequate to express the complexity of what she was feeling. "I guess this is it then. For now," Ethan said. "We'll figure out what comes next. Just not tonight." She nodded, unable to trust her voice further. As she reached for the door handle, Ethan spoke again. "Zara." His voice carried so much: regret, tenderness, confusion, loss. "If things had been different—" "I know," she whispered. "Me too." The finality of the car door closing behind her seemed to echo in the quiet street. Zara didn't look back as she entered her building, knowing that if she saw Ethan's face once more, her carefully maintained composure might shatter completely. Inside her apartment, surrounded by the familiar items that had witnessed the beginning of what she'd thought might be the most significant relationship of her life, Zara finally allowed herself to break down. The tears came in earnest now. For what they'd had, for what they'd lost, for the impossibility of their situation, and for the mothers whose complicated lives and choices had set this tragedy in motion long before either she or Ethan had drawn their first breaths. Eventually, exhausted by emotion and the day's revelations, she curled up on her couch, still fully dressed. As sleep began to claim her, Zara's last thought was of her mother, who had wanted so desperately to create connection through her daughter, never imagining how that connection would ultimately manifest or what pain it would eventually cause. 6 months passed. Winter yielded to spring, and spring blossomed into early summer, the seasons marking time in a way that felt both glacial and accelerated to Zara. The initial shock had given way to a dull ache that occasionally sharpened into moments of acute grief, usually triggered by mundane reminders: a song they had enjoyed together, the scent of Ethan's preferred coffee blend that she accidentally purchased, the way certain phrases in his emails echoed things he used to say. The telehealth project continued, their professional interaction maintained through carefully choreographed meetings where they were never alone together, their communication conducted primarily through team members or written exchanges. Vanessa Chen, Hamilton Tech's PR director, had given Zara a knowing look when the romantic relationship ended, clearly assuming she'd been right about its temporary nature. Zara had let her believe whatever she wanted. The truth was too complicated, too personal to share. On a warm June morning, Zara sat in her office at the clinic, reviewing the latest data from the telehealth stations. The program had exceeded expectations, expanding to 12 community sites with demonstrable improvements in mental health access for their target population. It was a success story by any metric, proof that good could emerge even from the most painful circumstances. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Dr. Matthews, there's someone here to see you." Her receptionist's expression was carefully neutral, which immediately told Zara who the visitor was. "Thank you, Lisa. Give me a moment, please." Zara took a deep breath, smoothing her blouse and checking her reflection in the small mirror she kept in her desk drawer. She still cared how she looked when she saw him, a small vanity she allowed herself despite everything. When Ethan entered, she was struck by the subtle changes in his appearance. He'd lost weight, and a new sprinkle of gray had appeared at his temples. The dark circles under his eyes suggested he wasn't sleeping well, a condition she understood intimately. "Hi," he said simply, standing awkwardly just inside her office door. "Hi." Zara gestured to the chair across from her desk. "This is unexpected. I was in Oakland for a meeting with the community center directors. Thought it made sense to stop by since I haven't been to the clinic in a while." He sat, his posture formal. "The program's numbers are impressive." "They are," she agreed. "Your team has been incredibly supportive." A silence fell between them. Not the comfortable quiet they had once shared, but something strained with unspoken thoughts. Ethan broke it first. "I actually came for another reason," he admitted. "I received a package from Marie Fontaine yesterday. She's sending similar materials to you." Zara felt a flutter of anxiety. "What kind of materials?" "Letters between our mothers and Eliza." He hesitated. "And DNA test results." She stared at him. "DNA tests? When did we—" "We didn't. Marie had samples from items we used at her house. Our teacups, I think. She had the testing done privately." His expression was difficult to read. "She wanted to be certain, for both our sakes." "And?" Zara's heart was suddenly pounding. Ethan met her eyes directly. "We're not siblings, Zara, not half or otherwise. We're not biologically related at all." The words seemed to hang in the air, impossible to process immediately. But Marie said, "Your father was approached about being a donor, yes, but according to Marie's letter, Eliza's colleague at the fertility clinic made a mistake. Or perhaps a deliberate substitution. The sample used wasn't James Hamilton's. It was from an anonymous donor with a similar educational and health profile." "How can she be sure?" "The DNA comparison is conclusive. We share no more genetic material than any two random strangers." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Apparently, Eliza's machinations weren't as successful as she believed." Zara sat back in her chair, overcome by a wave of conflicting emotions: relief, confusion, anger, and a dangerous flicker of hope she wasn't ready to acknowledge. Why would Marie tell us we were siblings if she wasn't certain? She believed it completely based on what Catherine had told her. It wasn't until she saw us together, saw our connection, that she began to have doubts. She writes that something felt off about the intensity of our bond, that it didn't present like a biological connection despite certain superficial similarities. So she had us tested without our knowledge or consent, Zara said, a flash of anger cutting through her confusion, after dropping a bomb that completely destroyed our relationship. She wanted to be absolutely sure before giving us potentially false hope. Ethan leaned forward, his expression earnest. Zara, I'm not defending her methods, but she's 86 years old and was carrying a burden of secrets that weren't hers to begin with. She did the best she could. Zara stood, needing to move, to process. She walked to her office window, looking out at the small community garden the clinic had established the previous year. The vegetable beds were flourishing, tended by clients as part of their therapy. All these months, she said softly, all this pain and separation. For nothing. Not for nothing, Ethan responded, his voice closer now. He had risen to stand behind her, though still maintaining a careful distance. We learned the truth about our mothers, about the complex web of relationships that shaped them, and us. That's not nothing. Zara turned to face him. What happens now? The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and uncertainty. Ethan's eyes, those familiar eyes that had haunted her dreams for months, held a cautious warmth. That depends, he said carefully, on what you want, on what's possible after everything we've been through. I don't know, she admitted. It's not as simple as just picking up where we left off. No, he agreed. It couldn't be. We're different people now. They stood in silence, the gap between them simultaneously vast and microscopic. 6 months of separate processing, of grief and adaptation, had changed them both in ways that couldn't be undone simply because the biological barrier had been removed. Could we start with lunch? Ethan suggested finally. Not today. I have to get back to the city. But maybe this weekend? Somewhere neutral. Lunch, Zara repeated, testing how the simple proposal felt. I think I could do lunch. His smile, genuine this time, sent a familiar warmth through her chest, tempered now by caution born of experience. Saturday? That Ethiopian place you like? 1 o'clock, she agreed. After Ethan left, Zara sat at her desk for a long time, staring at the space he had occupied. The revelation had upended her world once again, but this time the disruption felt less catastrophic, more like a door creaking open after months of being sealed shut. When her own package from Marie arrived that evening, Zara settled on her couch to read the enclosed letter, a glass of wine in hand. Dear Zara, by now, Ethan will have shared the truth about your genetic relationship, or rather, the lack thereof. I cannot adequately express my regret for the pain my premature disclosure caused you both. In my defense, I believed completely what Catherine had told me about Eliza's arrangement. It wasn't until seeing you together that doubt began to creep in. The DNA analysis confirms what I began to suspect. The sample used for your conception was not from James Hamilton. Whether through error or deliberate substitution by the clinic staff, Catherine received genetic material from another donor entirely. I debated whether to share this discovery with you. Perhaps it would have been kinder to let you both move forward separately, believing the biological barrier was real. But I've lived too long with secrets and their poisonous effects on those I love. You deserve the truth, whatever you choose to do with it. The enclosed letters may offer some comfort, or at least context. They span decades and reveal the evolution of the complicated bonds between your mother, Elizabeth, and Eliza. What began in passion and ended in rupture eventually transformed into something like wisdom in their later years. Elizabeth's final letter to Eliza, written months before her death, speaks of you specifically. She had intuited the truth about Catherine's choice and expressed a hope that you and Ethan might know each other someday, though certainly not in the way fate arranged. I remain available to you both, should you wish to discuss any of this further. Whatever path you choose, together or separately, please know that your mothers, for all their flaws and complicated choices, would be proud of the extraordinary people you have become. With deep affection and regret, Marie Zara set the letter aside and turned to the stack of correspondence spanning nearly 4 decades. She began with the earliest, passionate exchanges between Elizabeth and Eliza during their MIT years, full of mathematical discussions interwoven with tender personal reflections. She read of their deteriorating relationship, the pain of Elizabeth's choice to pursue a conventional life with James, and Eliza's bitter disappointment. Catherine appeared in the later letters, first as Eliza's confidant, then as a friend to both women trying desperately to mediate their conflict. Zara felt a profound connection to her mother's written voice, recognizing the compassionate wisdom that had shaped her own approach to helping others. Most poignant were the letters from the women's later years. Reflective, philosophical exchanges that spoke of reconciliation, acceptance, and a mature understanding of the choices that had defined their lives. In Elizabeth's final letter, she wrote, "I sometimes wonder how different our lives might have been if I'd had more courage, if society had been more accepting, if we had found a way to bridge our differences rather than letting them divide us. But then, I look at my son, our brilliant, sensitive Ethan, and I cannot regret the path that brought him into being. Your work has transformed education for countless children, and Catherine's daughter Zara carries forward her extraordinary empathy and intelligence. Perhaps the universe, in its wisdom, arranged things exactly as they needed to be." Tears slipped down Zara's cheeks as she read these words from a woman she had never met but whose life had become inexorably intertwined with her own. These 3 brilliant women, Elizabeth, Eliza, and Catherine, had loved and lost, hurt and healed, made profound mistakes and remarkable contributions. And somehow, against all odds, their children had found each other. Saturday arrived with perfect Bay Area weather, mild sunshine and a gentle breeze off the water. Zara dressed with care, choosing a flowing maxi dress in a deep teal that had always been one of her best colors. She arrived at the restaurant a few minutes early, her stomach fluttering with nerves that felt both familiar and entirely new. Ethan was already there, waiting outside rather than claiming a table. He looked better than he had in her office, more rested, his clothes fitting properly again, his smile easy when he spotted her approaching. "You look beautiful," he said, the simple compliment hanging between them like a question. "Thank you," she replied. "You look good too, better." "I feel better." He held the door for her, a gesture that carried echoes of their past together. Inside, they were seated at a quiet corner table. After ordering, an awkward silence fell, both of them suddenly uncertain how to navigate this new terrain. "I read all the letters," Zara said finally. "So did I." Ethan nodded. "It's strange, isn't it? To see our mothers as young women making mistakes, falling in love, struggling with impossible choices. It makes them more human," Zara agreed. "More real somehow." "I keep thinking about the mathematical work they were doing together," Ethan said, his eyes brightening with the intellectual curiosity she had always found so attractive. The predictive algorithms they were developing were genuinely revolutionary for their time. If they'd continued their collaboration, Hamilton Tech might have existed decades sooner, Zara finished for him. "Exactly. And their ethical disagreement. My mother was right about the potential for weaponization, but Eliza was right about the positive applications. They needed each other's perspectives." Their food arrived, the familiar ritual of sharing Ethiopian dishes creating a natural bridge between them. As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily, touching on the telehealth project, developments at the clinic, and Ethan's recent decision to establish a foundation specifically focused on ethical AI applications in healthcare. "I've been thinking a lot about legacy," he explained, about how we honor the past while creating something better for the future. That's something I've been wrestling with too, Zara admitted. Understanding my mother's choices has made me reconsider some of my own. Such as how I approach relationships, the walls I've built to protect myself. She met his eyes directly. What I'm willing to risk for something that matters. The moment hung between them, loaded with potential. Ethan reached across the table, his hand stopping just short of hers. Where do we go from here, Zara? The question was gentle, patient, leaving space for any answer she might give. She studied his face, the face that had become so dear to her in such a short time, that had haunted her thoughts for 6 long months of separation. They weren't the same people who had met on that plane. The journey through pain, revelation, and recovery had transformed them both. Whatever might grow between them now would be something new, informed by the past but not bound by it. Slowly, deliberately, she bridged the small remaining distance between their hands, her fingers entwining with his in a gesture that felt both familiar and entirely new. Forward, she said simply, together, one step at a time. Outside the restaurant, standing on the sunlit sidewalk, Ethan gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his touch carrying a question. Zara answered by rising on her toes to press a soft kiss to his lips, their first in half a year, flavored with spices and possibility. As they walked together toward the waterfront, hands linked between them, Zara thought about the improbable series of events that had brought them to this moment. A delayed flight, a downgraded seat, a chance mention of her mother's school. Perhaps it had all been random coincidence, or perhaps, as Elizabeth had suggested in her final letter, the universe had arranged things exactly as they needed to be. Either way, she was grateful for the truth, however painful, for the healing, however slow, and for the second chance that stretched before them like the sparkling bay, boundless with potential. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen